Comfort filter protocol. There's a part of your mind that loves comfort more than truth. It isn't lazy and it isn't foolish. It's a survival instinct, honed by centuries of human struggle. Every day you walk through a world filled with sharp edges. Disappointment, mortality, failure, betrayal, the terrifying unknown. If you faced every threat in its naked reality, your nerves would shatter. So your brain steps in with its oldest defense, the comfort filter protocol. This protocol is silent, automatic, and nearly invisible. It doesn't erase reality, it repaints it. Where there is danger, it hangs a curtain. Where there is confusion, it invents a story. Where there is pain, it finds a moral. In every shadow, it hangs a lantern, not to show you what's there, but to comfort you with the idea that nothing bad can hide in the dark. It starts small. You tell yourself the job loss was for the best. There must be something better coming. You explain away a lover's betrayal as a lesson you needed. You lose a friend, and instead of admitting to grief, you repeat that everything happens for a reason. These stories aren't always true, but they are always soothing. Each one coats the sharp edge of life in a layer of soft logic, turning every wound into a fable, every failure into fate. The comfort filter isn't just personal, it's cultural. Society spins myths of progress, justice, reward for hard work, safety for the righteous. Fairy tales and parables promise that goodness prevails, that suffering means growth, that everything works out in the end. We are trained from childhood to see patterns, to trust happy endings, to believe we are the authors of our own story, no matter how much chaos swirls outside the page. Psychologically, this is called defensive reasoning. When a truth feels threatening, when it shakes your sense of self, your world view, your faith in the order of things, your mind doesn't attack it head on. It wraps it in velvet. It finds reasons, excuses, metaphors. Sometimes it simply forgets. It is not lying to you, it is protecting you. The stories you tell yourself about why things happen are like padding in a cell, softening the blows, keeping the mind upright. But the protocol doesn't just dull pain, it can blind you. It can keep you from facing the sharp, necessary truths that would actually set you free. The parent who refuses to see their child suffering, the partner who stays in a toxic relationship, the citizen who excuses injustice with, "That's just the way it is." All are victims of the comfort filter. Every time you repeat, "It's fine, it's always been fine," you place another layer between yourself and the world as it is. Think of history's most painful lessons, the realities people refused to face, until denial collapsed under the weight of evidence. The scientist who clings to a dead theory, the leader who blames everyone but himself, the community that ignores signs of danger until disaster strikes. In each case, comfort was chosen over truth, until reality became impossible to ignore. But there is a reason for this. The truth, unfiltered, can be too much. The world is random. Justice is often late or absent. Good people suffer. Bad people prosper. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. So your brain, without asking, gives you the gift of soft logic, the comforting story. It lets you sleep at night, face loss, and dare to hope again. It's not a flaw. It's a coping mechanism. Yet, if you never look behind the filter, you risk living in a velvet prison, never asking the hard questions, never changing what must be changed, never confronting the hard, sharp edge that, though it cuts, can also carve a new beginning. The key is balance, to notice the comfort filter as it settles in, to thank it for its service, and sometimes to pull it aside, just enough to see the blade beneath belief, to feel the sting of truth, to know that while stories can heal, only honesty can transform. So next time you find yourself telling a story to soften a blow, ask, is this comfort or is this truth? And if it's comfort, what's hiding underneath? Because the mind will always try to shield you from the pain of reality. But sometimes, the courage to lift the curtain is what lets the real light in. Belief anchor lock. You think you see the world and then decide what to believe about it. That's the story you've been told, the myth of the rational mind. That facts come first, and belief is built on their foundation. That your eyes, your ears, your senses deliver a stream of pure reality, and only afterward do you weigh, judge, and accept. But that's not how it works. Not really. There's a secret mechanism behind the scenes, a switch so subtle, so powerful, that you hardly notice it working. You don't perceive, then believe. You believe, then perceive. The order is reversed, and that reversal, that anchor, shapes your life more than you could ever know. This is the belief anchor lock. It begins with a single idea, a seed planted by parents, teachers, the media, or just a random experience that sticks. Well, maybe it's something simple. People are kind, or the world is dangerous, or I'm not good enough. Maybe it's something enormous. My side is right. They are the enemy. There is no hope. Whatever the belief, once it takes root, it doesn't just sit quietly in your mind. It anchors itself deep. It wraps itself around your perception. And suddenly, everything you see, everything you hear, everything you remember, bends to serve the anchor. Now, when you witness a stranger's smile, your mind asks, does this match my belief? If you believe people are kind, you see warmth. You trust the gesture. If you believe people are cruel, you sense sarcasm, a hidden motive. Two people, standing side by side, witness the same moment and walk away with opposite truths. Not because the world changed, but because their belief shaped what their eyes allowed in. It's everywhere, in relationships, in politics, in faith, in every argument online, every silent judgment in a crowded room. You search for evidence not to discover truth, but to protect the anchor. You accept what fits, ignore what doesn't, distort what threatens. This is not a flaw, it's a feature. The mind craves certainty more than truth. It needs to feel safe, to feel right, to feel stable. Doubt is dangerous. Doubt is chaos. So the anchor stays and perception bends. Even your memories are not safe. When the anchor is strong, it reshapes the past. A parent who is sometimes loving and sometimes harsh becomes only one or the other, depending on what your belief demands. A success is magnified, a failure erased, or the other way around. The past itself is rewritten to keep the anchor secure. Science calls this confirmation bias, but that phrase is too cold for what it really is. It's not just a bias, it's a lock, a gravitational force that bends everything in its orbit. Think about what that means. Once a belief is anchored, the world itself seems to prove it right, again and again. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, a closed circuit. You become unable to see what doesn't fit, unable to hear what challenges, unable to remember what disagrees. This is why cults thrive, why propaganda works, why families fall apart over politics, why trauma feels inescapable. It's not just outside influence, it's the anchor within, gripping perception, filtering reality, painting the same story on every blank wall. And here's the tragedy. The stronger the anchor, the less you notice it. The more you think you're just seeing things as they are. You forget the original seed. You lose the memory of ever doubting. You start to think that anyone who disagrees with you must be blind, deluded, dishonest, or even evil. Not because you're cruel, but because your anchor has made other perspectives impossible. But the world doesn't need more anchors. It needs more sailors. So, what do? How do you break the lock? It starts with doubt, not as a weakness, but as a discipline, with catching yourself in the act of defending your anchor, with asking, what if I'm wrong? What would I see if I believed the opposite? With seeking out voices, stories, truths that threaten your certainty, not to surrender all belief, but to loosen the grip, to let in a little more light. And you learn to notice the feeling of threat when your anchor is challenged, the rush of anger, the urge to dismiss, to argue, to retreat. That's not just emotion. It's your anchor fighting for its life. But here's the truth. You are not your belief. You are the one holding the anchor. And you can choose, even for a moment, to let it sway, to loosen its grip, to wonder what else might be true. Because reality is bigger than any belief. And the mind is never free while the anchor holds all the power. So loosen it. Look again. Let yourself see, not just what you expect, but what's actually there. That is where real vision begins. Language cage modulation. You think words are just tools, simple labels you use to name things, ideas, feelings. But words are more than that. They are cages, invisible boundaries that shape the very way you perceive the world. The language you speak doesn't merely describe reality, it constructs it. It draws the lines around what you can understand, what you can imagine, what you can even notice. This is language cage modulation, The profound truth that your mind's reach is limited by the words you have, and your world expands or contracts with the vocabulary you carry. Imagine trying to see the color blue if your language has no word for it. For some cultures, there is no separate word for blue. The sky and the sea are described with the same term. Without that linguistic boundary, does blue exist? The question seems absurd, but studies show that people without a word for blue perceive and categorize colors differently. Their world literally shifts because their language shifts. Language shapes your perception in countless subtle ways. It guides your attention. It prioritizes some sensations over others. It frames concepts in ways that influence how you think about them. You can have dozens of words for snow and notice every kind, or have just one and see it all as the same. You can speak a language that distinguishes between past and future with precision, or one that blurs time into a continuous flow, and your experience of time itself bends accordingly. But the cage isn't just about vocabulary. It's grammar, syntax, metaphor, how sentences are formed, how ideas connect, how emotions are expressed. Some languages compel speakers to constantly note direction, while others focus on relationships or social hierarchy. These linguistic structures train your brain to prioritize different aspects of experience. Your language teaches you what matters and what doesn't. This modulation extends to abstract concepts too. If your language lacks words for certain feelings, like specific shades of melancholy or nuanced forms of love, you might find it harder to recognize, understand, or communicate those emotions. They exist beneath the surface, unnamed, invisible. Your inner world is shaped by the outer words you have to hold it. Language cage. Modulation means your mind isn't free-floating. It's tethered to the lexicon you've inherited. You can only think what you can name. You can only question what you can articulate. The limits of your language are the limits of your reality. But there's hope. You can expand the cage. You can learn new words, new ways of framing experience, poetry, metaphor, music. These crack the bars open. Learning a new language literally rewires your brain, opens new neural pathways, and invites you into alternate realities. Sometimes, silence or music or art speaks truths that words cannot capture, and in those moments, you glimpse a world beyond the cage. Understanding language, cage modulation invites humility. It teaches that no language fully captures reality. Every word is a shadow of what it names. Every sentence is an approximation, and every speaker lives within a partial world. So, when you speak, pause. Notice the shape of your words. Listen to what they include and what they leave out. Notice how your vocabulary paints a picture, but also fences in the edges. Notice the ways your mind's eye can see beyond the cage, even when the words can't follow. Because the journey of understanding is also a journey beyond language. It's learning to sense the vastness beyond the borders your words set. It's embracing mystery where definitions fall short. It's finding silence between sentences and letting the unspoken expand your world. Your language is a cage, but it can also be a key. Emotional color projection. You wake up to rain. The sky is gray, the light dull and heavy. You feel low, raw, a little afraid. The day seems darker than it should. Streets empty, colors drained, the world narrowed down to a tunnel of gloom. But the rain is just rain. The sky is just sky. What's really changed is you. Your fear is the tint on the glass, the lens through which you see the world. And yet, it feels so real, like the universe itself has bent to match your mood. This is emotional color projection, the mind's quiet trick of painting reality with the hues of its own weather. Fear, sadness, anger, joy, each one a dye dropped into clear water, swirling until every edge of perception is stained. The day is not darker. The world is not colder. But it feels that way because your internal storm has pulled the sun from the sky. You've felt it 1,000 times. The difference between a park on a happy day, where every flower is brighter, every face more beautiful, the sky impossibly blue, and the same park when you're grieving, anxious, alone. Suddenly the colors flatten, the laughter feels distant, the air too sharp or too dull. Nothing outside you changed. Only your emotional weather warped the external light. Your mind is a projector, not a camera. It doesn't just record the world, it filters, distorts, reimagines it. When joy floods your chest, Even ordinary places sparkle. A cluttered desk, a cracked sidewalk, a cloudy window, each one a little miracle of light and possibility. You fall in love, and suddenly every song on the radio is about you. The world is brighter, not because the sun came out, but because you're shining from within. But when anxiety sets in, the colors drain. Conversations feel tense, even if they were not. Shadows grow longer. The world feels loaded, dangerous, unfriendly. People glance at you, and you see threat, suspicion, judgment, when they are just lost in their own thoughts. The filter is yours, but the world wears the blame. Psychologists call this affective realism, the way emotion shapes what you perceive as real. The angry man sees a world full of rivals. The grieving woman walks through streets that feel abandoned, even at noon. The joyful child sees adventure everywhere, even in the cracks of the pavement. Emotion is not an add-on. It's the palette the mind uses to paint the world you walk through. It's why two people can stand in the same room and see two completely different worlds. One is overwhelmed by color, possibility, hope. The other feels suffocated, lost, as if the walls are closing in. Each is convinced their reality is the truth, not realizing that what they see is a projection, not a photograph. But emotional color projection doesn't just shape how you see, it shapes how you remember. A moment experienced in fear is remembered as darker, colder, even if the facts say otherwise. A memory of joy is painted in brighter tones. Your autobiography is colored in, not by history, but by the storms that moved through your mind as the story unfolded. This is why nostalgia can hurt so sweetly. You look back and remember colors, sounds, feelings that were never really there, or perhaps were there only for you, in that mood, in that hour. The past is a stained glass window built from your own emotional spectrum. It can become a prison, this power. When depression dulls the world, everything seems empty. Food loses its taste. Music becomes noise. Beauty hides behind a veil. The mind insists that this is the way things truly are, and you forget that the color will return when your inner sky clears. But it can also be a gift. Joy, wonder, hope. These are not just feelings, but tools for transforming the world you live in. When you learn to recognize that your mood is the source of the color, you can step outside the illusion. You can remind yourself, the day is not ruined, only tinted. The world is not against you, only shadowed by your own weather. The practice is not to banish feeling, but to see it for what it is, a lens, not the truth. To pause when the world darkens and ask, what color am I wearing today? What light am I casting outward? Sometimes, the simple act of noticing is enough to soften the filter, to let a little real sunlight in. There is freedom here. Freedom to create your own color, to notice the projection and gently shift it, to let joy crack the gray, to let curiosity break through routine, to choose hope even in a landscape painted by fear. The world is not fixed. Your mind is not a prisoner. You are both artist and observer, both the painter and the painting. So the next time the world darkens, remember, the weather may be inside you. The storm may be yours to calm. And when the sun returns, you'll see the same old streets, the same faces, the same sky, but brighter, sharper, more alive. Not because the world changed, but because you did. The colors you see are not always the world's. Sometimes they are the light you bring. Normalcy looping effect. There's a truth hidden in plain sight. Almost anything, no matter how bizarre or unnatural, can become normal if you live with it long enough. The world is full of stories that started as shocks, as jolts to your sense of what's real. But over time, those shocks dull. The brain, desperate for stability, reclassifies the strange. The unfamiliar becomes the background. The absurd is rebranded as ordinary. You might notice it in small ways. The first time you move to a new city, every sound is strange. Sirens, foreign languages, a different sky at dusk. For a few weeks you're wide awake. Every day is data, your mind racing to map the unfamiliar. But one day you realize you've stopped noticing. The city's noise is just noise. The unfamiliar skyline is just your view. What once jolted you now soothes you to sleep. This is the normalcy looping effect. Repetition is the spell. When exposed to the same pattern over and over, the mind stops questioning it. The newness decays. Your reality, however improbable, becomes routine. It happens on every scale, from the personal to the planetary. Soldiers at war adapt to chaos. Prisoners adapt to confinement. Children adapt to pain or neglect so completely, they might never notice how abnormal their normal has become. Whole societies adjust to disaster, crisis, corruption, surveillance, or absurdity, not by fixing it, but by looping it, over and over, until the mind gives up on protest and calls it life. This isn't passivity, it's survival. The mind is not built to exist in constant alarm. Unfamiliarity is exhausting. Your mental circuits tire quickly of surprise, so they rewrite the code. If it keeps happening, it must be safe, or at least inevitable. And the moment something is inevitable, it is also invisible. It becomes background code, quietly shaping everything else. You see it in families that never talk about love or pain. The silence becomes so loud, it vanishes. The first time a cruel word is spoken, it stings. The 10th time, it barely registers. By the 100th, it's woven into the script of daily life. The abnormal isn't erased, it's assimilated. This effect is dangerous, but it's also how we survive. If we never normalized strangeness, we'd fall apart every time the world changed. It's what lets us move forward after loss. It's what helps us function under pressure. It's why people living in impossible circumstances find ways to laugh, to work, to plan for tomorrow. But the shadow side is real. When the loop hides the absurd, we stop questioning what should be questioned. The mind, desperate to keep the loop running, filters out all the warning bells. What once seemed unthinkable, a corrupt leader, a dying ecosystem, an unhealthy routine, a cruel habit, gets patched into the operating system. Normalcy, once established, becomes its own argument. It's always been this way. You become the frog in the slowly warming water. The first degree is a shock. The 10th is barely noticed. By the time the water is boiling, the mind has written it off as background noise. You don't react, because reacting to what's normal is madness. So, the madness persists. You can see it in society's rituals, in work cultures, in online spaces, in personal relationships. The mind's need to loop and smooth overrides its need to question. We forget how strange our habits would look to someone seeing them for the first time. And sometimes, waking up to the loop is the most disorienting thing of all. You catch yourself and ask, how did this become my life? When did I stop noticing? The city, the job, the relationship, the self. You realize that you have become a passenger on a ride you once wanted to steer. The good news is, this spell can be broken. The same mind that normalizes can also awaken. It happens when you travel, when you lose, when you grieve, when you fall in love, when you see yourself with a stranger's eyes. The absurd is revealed not by protest, but by perspective, by remembering that normal is just a story the mind keeps telling itself. You can disrupt the loop, ask questions, seek novelty, listen for the discomfort beneath your routines, invite someone to point out what you've stopped seeing, be willing to be shocked again, willing to notice the strange beneath the ordinary. Because if you don't, the loop tightens, your world shrinks, the mind stops learning, stops growing, stops feeling alive. The background code runs on, and life becomes a dream you can't quite wake up from. But you don't have to sleepwalk forever. You can choose to see the strangeness, to shake the spell, to remember that normal is only ever a loop, one you have the power to break. And when you do, even for a moment, the world opens again, the shock returns, the wonder stirs, and the mind remembers. Everything familiar was once impossible. Everything normal began as something strange. Pattern injection bias. It's late at night and you stare up at the clouds, searching for familiar shapes. A rabbit, a ship, a face half smiling at the moon. The longer you look, the clearer the image becomes, until you're convinced it was always there, just waiting for you to notice. It's harmless, even magical. But what if that instinct is more than a child's game? What if it's a deep, relentless engine at the core of your mind? This is pattern injection bias. Your brain's built-in compulsion to inject meaning into the formless, to carve order from chaos, to insist on significance where none actually exists. You don't do it on purpose. Your ancestors' survival depended on it. The ones who saw patterns, who noticed paw prints in the dirt, a change in the wind, a predator's camouflaged movement, lived long enough to pass on their genes. Better a false alarm than a fatal mistake. So your mind evolved into a masterful pattern detector. But now, In a world where tigers no longer stalk the village, that old machinery has nowhere to aim, so it finds patterns everywhere. You see faces in tree bark, secret symbols in the numbers on your clock, omens in the way the traffic lights turn green just as you arrive. A song comes on the radio, and it feels like a message. You bump into an old friend and wonder if fate is pushing you towards something. Your phone glitches, and you're certain it's a sign. The pattern isn't there in the world. It's injected by your mind, stamped in place by the weight of your longing or fear. Sometimes, these patterns are private comforts. You tell yourself that everything happens for a reason. You connect a string of small coincidences and feel watched over, chosen, destined. Other times, the patterns become traps. You see threats in harmless gestures, blame in a stranger's glance, clues in random noise. This is how superstition is born. This is how conspiracy theories spread. The more chaotic the world feels, the more desperate the mind becomes to find a signal in the static. Pattern injection. Bias doesn't care if the pattern is real. It cares how it feels. If the story calms your fear, if the coincidence gives you hope, if the imagined message makes sense of your loneliness or confusion, then the pattern has served its purpose. The emotion it triggers is real, even when the connection isn't. This isn't just individual. Entire societies are built on shared pattern injections, rituals, myths, urban legends, the hunt for lucky charms. We chase after meaning, and when the universe is silent, we invent a voice to fill the gap. Because to the human mind, randomness is unbearable, silence is unthinkable, chaos is terrifying, pattern is safety, even when it's just a story. And sometimes, that bias leads to beauty. Art, poetry, dreams, music, all are born of the mind's gift for finding meaning in the formless. We create constellations from stars, stories from coincidence, and love from a single meeting. The danger only comes when we mistake the pattern for fact, when we build our choices, our beliefs, our fears on shadows in the fog. But knowing this, you have a choice. You can smile at the face in the clouds without mistaking it for a sign. You can let the music speak to your heart without believing it's a message from fate. You can hold on to the beauty of invented patterns while remembering that the world is often more random, more silent, and more indifferent than your mind wants to believe. Pattern injection. Bias is not a flaw. It's a side effect of being human, of living in a mind built to connect. The patterns may not be real, but the emotion is. And in the end, perhaps it's not the accuracy of the pattern that matters most, but the wisdom to know when to let go, and when to simply enjoy the face in the clouds, smiling back at you in the fading light. Mirror phase distortion. At first, you didn't know who you were. You existed, but you were a storm of sensation, hunger, sound, warmth, pain. And then one day, something changed. You saw yourself in a reflection. A window, a mirror, a pool of water. For the first time, you realized there was a you that could be seen. And in that moment, your sense of self shifted forever. This was the beginning of the mirror phase. It didn't just teach you to recognize your own face. It taught you to look for yourself outside yourself, to believe your identity was something you could see and that others could confirm. It was a door. It was a trap. From that day onward, every sense of who am I became a question asked in the language of mirrors. You looked for clues not within, but in the way others looked back at you. Were they pleased? Disappointed? Did they see someone funny, clever, strong, beautiful? Or did their gaze find something lacking, something you couldn't fix? Your core began to bend, not to your own experience, but to the reflections around you. You became a patchwork of glances, comments, subtle shifts in tone. Your identity, a mosaic made of other people's reactions. You started editing yourself to fit the mirrors that surrounded you. You laughed at the right jokes, shrank from the wrong questions, hid the parts that drew frowns and shame. You wore masks within masks. Sometimes, you lost track of which one was really yours, but the distortion runs deeper. Over time, you forgot that the mirror was ever just a surface. You started believing the reflection was the reality. If people admired you, you felt real. If they turned away, you vanished. The line between self and image blurred. The gaze of others became a kind of gravity, bending your beliefs, your choices, your very sense of truth. And the world is full of mirrors. Social media, gossip, parents, partners, strangers in the street. Each one returns a slightly different version of you. Sometimes you see yourself as a hero, sometimes a failure, sometimes a joke, sometimes invisible. The fragments don't always fit, but you try to stitch them together anyway, desperate to make a whole. Think about the way you prepare for a conversation, rehearsing lines and postures, hoping for the right reflection. The way you scroll through photos, looking for one that tells the story you want others to believe. The way a single word, a compliment or an insult, can tilt your world off its axis just because of how it shapes the mirror. The tragedy is, the more you chase the perfect reflection, the further you drift from your core. The more you contort yourself to fit, the less you remember what it was like to be whole before the mirrors came. And yet, can you really live without them? To be human is to need some reflection, connection, feedback, witnessing. But when does healthy reflection become distortion? When does the gaze of others become a prison? Ask yourself, whose reflection are you carrying today? Whose opinions echo in your mind, shaping your choices? What part of yourself have you hidden, only because you feared how it might look in someone else's eyes? This is the cost of the mirror phase distortion. A life spent chasing approval, fearing rejection, mistaking the flicker of admiration for real love. You become a collection of poses, each one hoping for validation. You lose the ability to recognize your own face unless someone else is there to approve it. But beneath the glass, beneath the shifting light, your true self waits, unchanged, watching, hoping you'll turn away from the mirrors, even for a moment, and ask, not, how do I look, but how do I feel? Who am I when no one is watching? It isn't easy. The pull of the mirror is strong. But freedom begins with noticing the distortion, with recognizing that every reflection is partial, incomplete, distorted by the glass, the angle, the gaze of the other. You don't have to break the mirrors. You just have to stop believing they hold the whole truth. So try it, even for a moment. Stand in your own skin without explanation or apology. Breathe. Listen for the voice beneath the reflection. The one that remembers the world before you saw your own face. The one that doesn't bend to mirrors because it knows. It has always been there. That is the beginning of real identity, and that is the only reflection you can truly call your own. Social context. Override. You believe what you see. You trust your senses, your memory, your judgment. You hold tight to what feels true, real, certain. But then, something shifts. Around you, the world starts whispering a different story. Others see things differently. They nod with conviction, speak with confidence, live as if their reality is the only reality. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, your certainty begins to erode. Doubt seeps in. What if you're wrong? What if your truth is just one version among many? This is social context override, a profound psychological phenomenon where the beliefs, perceptions, and judgments of those around you rewrite your sense of reality, like a virus that infects thought itself. It's a subtle, powerful force that shapes human experience far more than we realize. The social brain craves connection, acceptance, belonging. To survive in a group means to align, to match the rhythms, the opinions, the realities shared by others. From early childhood, you learn that your environment shapes not only what you do, but what you believe, because belonging to the group is safety, and safety often demands conformity. One classic experiment reveals this vividly. Psychologist Solomon Asch, in the 1950s, asked participants to judge the length of lines. Simple, objective task. But here's the twist. Everyone else in the room, planted actors, deliberately gave wrong answers. The true participant found themselves facing a choice: trust their own eyes or the unanimous group. Shockingly, over a third of people conformed, denying their own perception just to align with the majority. The pull of social consensus overpowered individual certainty. This isn't mere peer pressure, it's deeper. A neurological rewiring of belief itself. When your group believes something, your brain adjusts. Neural pathways reinforce the shared view. Memories shift. Your interpretation of facts bends. Your sense of what is no longer fixed by sensory data alone, but by social validation. Reality becomes a collective construct. Consider the power of rumors, urban legends, or mass delusions. Entire communities can come to believe in events or phenomena that never happened, simply because the shared narrative feels more real than contradicting evidence. The Salem witch trials, the War of the Worlds radio panic, social media misinformation waves, all showcase how collective belief can rewrite the facts in millions of minds simultaneously. Even in daily life, social context override exerts its influence. A conversation about a movie or a product can shift your opinion simply because the group consensus leans a certain way. Political beliefs, religious faith, cultural values, all are deeply entangled with what your social context reinforces. You may be sure you think for yourself, but your thoughts often echo the voices around you. This override also extends to memory itself. Psychologists have shown that memories are malleable, susceptible to suggestion. When a group recalls an event differently than you do, your own memory can shift to align. Shared recollections don't just coexist, they compete, and often the louder or more persistent memory wins. This is why eyewitness testimonies conflict, why family stories diverge, and why historical narratives evolve through social lenses. Why does this happen? Evolutionarily, humans are wired for social cohesion. Our ancestors depended on the group for food, protection, reproduction. Diverging too far from the social norm risked exile or death. The brain developed mechanisms to minimize conflict and maximize harmony, even if that meant overriding individual perception. The social self became as important as the personal self. But social context override is a double-edged sword. While it promotes unity and shared understanding, it also threatens autonomy and truth. It can suppress dissent, silence innovation, and enforce harmful norms. It can trap entire societies in echo chambers, where misinformation circulates unchallenged, and reality fractures into isolated belief bubbles. So, how do you resist? Awareness is the first step. Recognize that your beliefs are not purely your own, but are shaped by the social currents you swim in. Notice moments when you hesitate, when your conviction falters under the weight of consensus. Question the source of your certainty. Seek diverse perspectives. Test your beliefs against facts and reason, not just popular opinion. Cultivate inner confidence, not arrogance, but the calm that comes from understanding your mind's vulnerabilities. Practice critical thinking as a muscle, strengthening it through exposure to contradiction and complexity. Find spaces, mental, social, intellectual, where independent thought is nurtured, not punished. Remember that reality is not a fixed monolith, but a dynamic interplay between perception and consensus. Your mind is a garden where ideas grow, but the soil is the social environment. Choose carefully what you nurture. Social context. Override reminds us of the delicate balance between connection and individuality. To belong is human. To think freely is courage. Your certainty can be rewritten, but so can your freedom. Hold both truths lightly and move forward with eyes open, not just to what you see, but to who's watching with you. Crisis reality, collapse. It starts with a jolt, an accident, a phone call, a sharp word, a sudden threat. Your heart surges, your breathing stutters, and the world narrows to a tunnel. Your body floods with adrenaline, and your mind, the very thing you trust to make sense of chaos, begins to melt beneath the weight of panic. Thoughts speed up, logic stutters, and emotion swallows everything in its path. This is crisis reality, collapse. A moment when extreme feeling overloads your logic, and you mistake the raw voltage of survival for pure insight. In these moments, your senses sharpen, but your reasoning blurs. Every detail feels urgent, dangerous, significant. The ordinary becomes ominous. Time distorts. Minutes crawl by as if in slow motion, or else hours vanish in a blink. You can feel your body's ancient wiring take over. The brainstem shoves aside your reasoning mind and yells, "Survive. Now." And it feels like clarity. In the heat of the moment, panic speaks with the authority of prophecy. The first thought that flashes through your mind is treated as truth. You misread a noise as a threat, a look as judgment, a delay as disaster. Suddenly, every neutral event is colored by fear, by certainty, by the rush of feeling. Your brain, built for logic and nuance, is hijacked by a single command: react. But this clarity is a mirage. In crisis, adrenaline feels like revelation. You trust every hunch, every snap judgment, every dark prophecy that appears in your mind. You mistake anxiety for awareness, panic for insight. The world outside may be calm, but inside, catastrophe has become your compass. Think of the parent who gets a late-night call from an unknown number. Before the phone even rings a second time, their mind has painted the worst-case scenario in full color. They just know something is wrong. Panic becomes prophecy. Their brain ignores every rational explanation. Because in crisis, only disaster feels real. Or consider the doctor in the ER, suddenly overwhelmed by a critical case. The mind races through options, but logic stumbles. In the intensity of the moment, the obvious can be missed. Survival mode doesn't see complexity, it only sees threat. Later, when the adrenaline drains away, clarity returns, and the missed detail seems obvious. But in crisis, the world was collapsing, and the logic circuits shorted out. Crisis reality, collapse isn't just personal, it's collective. In moments of mass panic, natural disasters, financial crashes, even rumors spreading through a crowd, entire groups lose their ability to reason. Hysteria blooms. People rush for exits, buy up supplies, blame strangers. The more intense the fear, the more powerful the illusion of insight. It's happening, you think. I can feel it. But feeling is not knowing. Social media amplifies this collapse. One frightening headline, one rumor, one viral video, and suddenly millions are swept up in panic. Each person convinced that their emotion is proof of the world's danger. The internet becomes an echo chamber of crisis, where every voice shouts disaster, and every echo deepens the sense that the world is ending, right now. In these moments, the brain's ancient machinery is working as designed. It wants you alive, not accurate. So it edits reality. It removes nuance, exaggerates threat, discards patience. You become a lightning rod for fear, and your mind draws conclusions with the speed, and sometimes the recklessness, of survival. But after the storm passes, something strange happens. You look back, and the prophecies of panic have faded. The danger shrinks. The world regains its shape. You wonder how you could have believed with such certainty that disaster was inevitable. How your mind, usually sharp, could be so easily swept away. But this is the trap of crisis. It feels like the moment of greatest truth, when in fact, it is the moment of greatest distortion. This is why the same person can be calm and wise in one moment, and overwhelmed and impulsive in the next. Why a group can descend into chaos, even when everyone knows better. Why "I just had a feeling" so often leads to regret. In the heat of panic, adrenaline becomes prophecy, and logic is cast out. But crisis reality collapse is not just a failure, it's a function. It's the body's way of getting you out of the fire, across the street, away from danger. The problem is, in a world where most threats are not lions or cliffs, but social, emotional, existential, this ancient system malfunctions. It treats discomfort as disaster, uncertainty as threat, ambiguity as doom. And you believe it because it feels so real. So, what do? First, recognize the pattern. When you feel your mind racing, your body surging, your thoughts shrinking down to a single terrible point, pause, breathe, name the feeling. This is panic, not prophecy. Remind yourself, adrenaline is not insight. Fear is not foresight. Clarity in crisis is often the greatest illusion of all. And if you find yourself swept up in collective panic, step back. Question the certainty. Ask, is this really true, or is this just what fear feels like? Reach for facts, for context, for time. Give your mind space to recover its balance. In the space after the surge, logic returns. And with it, the wisdom to see beyond the storm. In the end, every life will know crisis. Every mind will collapse beneath the weight of panic, at least once. But you can learn to survive not just the crisis itself, but the collapse that follows. You can learn to recognize when your mind is hijacked by feeling, and choose, however shakily, to wait for real clarity. Because panic is not prophecy, and crisis, though it shakes the foundations, is not the end. The world will steady, logic will return, and you will find your footing, even after the collapse. Thought loop amplifier. It begins small. A flicker of worry. An idea you can't shake. A question that wakes you in the night. At first, it's just a thought, one among thousands that pass through your mind every day. You notice it. Maybe you try to reason with it, talk it down, ignore it, or distract yourself. But it doesn't leave. Instead, it repeats. And with each repetition, it changes. It grows heavier, sharper. It picks up new details, new emotions, new arguments. You feel it differently each time. Sometimes as fear, sometimes as certainty, sometimes as a hollow ache. The more it circles, the more real it feels. This is the thought loop amplifier. Your mind is an echo chamber, designed not only to think, but to remember, rehearse, analyze, anticipate. Each pass through the loop adds weight, emotion, intensity. Like a song stuck on repeat, the thought becomes familiar. Then it becomes important. Then it becomes inescapable. A single doubt, did I lock the door, returns, each time with more urgency, more anxiety. A memory, why did I say that, replays until it's no longer just a mistake, but a stain on your identity. An idea, what if something goes wrong, turns into an expectation, a prophecy. The mind, seeking certainty, carves grooves deeper and deeper until the thought isn't just passing through. It lives here now. Every repetition is an act of reinforcement. Each cycle strengthens the neural pathway. The brain, always adapting, learns, this is important, this must be true. This deserves my attention. The more you fight the thought, the more energy you give it. The more you analyze it, the more structure it gains. The mind, in its search for meaning, builds a scaffold around the thought, making it bigger, stronger, harder to ignore. Obsession is not just a symptom, it's architecture. It's the mind turning a spark into a fortress. You might see it in everyday anxiety. A worry about health becomes a web of symptoms, tests, internet searches, a hyper-awareness of every twinge in your body. The loop spins faster. The fear becomes architecture, a system of beliefs, rituals, rules you follow to keep the worst from happening. Soon the loop is no longer about the original thought. It's about the life you've built around it. Or maybe it's a relationship. You replay every word, every gesture, every silence. Did they mean it? Are they drifting away? Did I say too much? Each cycle adds another brick to the wall between you and peace. What started as curiosity becomes suspicion, then certainty, then a narrative you can't escape. The amplifier works in quieter ways too. The voice of your inner critic, once a whisper, becomes a constant drone. Not good enough, not ready, not worth it. Each repetition is a drop of water carving a canyon. Over time, you forget you ever lived any other way. The thought becomes your reality. Science has shown that repeated thoughts literally change the brain. Neural pathways grow more efficient, more automatic. What was once a choice becomes a reflex. The more you loop, the more you believe. The more you believe, the more the loop tightens. But the amplifier doesn't care if the thought is true. It only cares that it is repeated. This is how beliefs form, how obsessions take root, how entire worldviews are built on a single unchecked thought. The mind, trying to protect you, creates rules and rituals and stories, not to help you, but to give the loop a place to live. And the world around you plays along. The internet amplifies anxiety. Social media loops envy and outrage. Advertising loops insecurity. News loops fear. You live inside architecture built by repetition, yours and everyone else's. But here's the haunting part. The more real the thought feels, the less you question it. The architecture becomes invisible. You walk its halls every day. You decorate the rooms. You call it me. You forget there was ever a time before the loop began. Breaking the amplifier isn't about silencing the thought. It's about disrupting the cycle, letting the thought pass without building another story. Naming the loop, noticing the repetition, asking yourself, is this real or just rehearsed? Whose voice is this, really? What would happen if I let it fade instead of feeding it? Because every loop is an invitation to build or to release. You are not the architecture. You are the space it stands in. And even the strongest thought, the most relentless obsession, can lose its power the moment you choose to step outside the loop. You are not your repetition. You are the witness, the architect, the key. Memory rewrite reflex. Picture yourself closing your eyes, drifting back into your earliest memories. What do you see? A sunlit afternoon, the taste of something sweet. A face, half in shadow, smiling just for you. Maybe the details are sharp, crystal clear, every color bright, every feeling alive. But what if I told you, the memory you trust most, the moment you hold closest, might not be what actually happened? What if your past, as you recall it, is less a recording and more a vivid fiction, an emotional myth more powerful than reality? This is the memory rewrite reflex, a deep and persistent glitch in the human mind. It is the reason why so much of what you remember with conviction is not fact, but feeling. Memory, rewritten by emotion, more intense and persuasive than the truth. It starts quietly. A moment you lived, a conversation, a heartbreak, a victory, a mistake. You store it away. But memory is not a hard drive. It is a living process, a biological echo chamber that changes each time you revisit it. Every recall is a rewrite, every retrieval, an act of imagination colored by who you are now, what you want to believe, and, most of all, how you feel in the moment of remembering. Psychologists have shown this again and again. In one famous experiment, researchers asked people to recall where they were when the Challenger space shuttle exploded. They wrote their memories down in detail. Years later, those same people were asked again. Most recounted their memories with total confidence, but the stories had changed. Not a little, but a lot. Some described being in places they couldn't have been, surrounded by people who weren't there. Yet they believed these rewritten memories completely, even when confronted with their own original accounts. The lie wasn't just persuasive, it felt more real than the truth. Why does this happen? Because memory isn't meant to be a neutral record. It's meant to help you survive, to guide your actions and shape your sense of self. If the facts get in the way, if reality is too dull, too painful, or too unflattering, your mind reshapes the story to fit your needs. Sometimes, it adds details that never existed, filling gaps with imagination or hearsay. Sometimes, it sharpens the edges, turning mild embarrassment into humiliation, or slight disappointment into deep betrayal. Other times, it softens pain, erasing entire chapters, or inventing moments of triumph to balance regret. Think of the last argument you had, the last wound you suffered, the last time you felt joy or shame or longing. If you could replay the actual moment, you'd notice the differences. The look in someone's eyes wasn't quite so harsh. Your own words not quite so sharp. The room less cold, the sky less dark. But the version you carry, the one shaped by anger, guilt, hope, or loneliness, is more vivid, more cinematic. The memory's emotional truth overshadows the factual one, and so you trust the feeling, even as the facts dissolve. This isn't just an individual problem, it shapes history itself. Ask 5 people who witnessed the same event, and you'll hear 5 different stories, each delivered with certainty, each shaped by what the teller needs the story to mean. Family myths are born this way. A grandmother's sacrifice, a father's betrayal, a sibling's heroism. Stories told and retold, polished into legend by generations of retelling. By the time they reach you, they're more fiction than fact, but they shape who you believe yourself to be. Memory rewrite isn't always about protecting you from pain. Sometimes it amplifies it. Trauma, especially, is notorious for this. The more you revisit a wound, the sharper it feels, the bigger the scar grows in your memory. Details change, events stretch or shrink, guilt and anger magnify. And every time you recall it, you risk reinforcing not the event, but the emotion. The lie becomes brighter than the reality, and soon your mind cannot distinguish between the two. Socially, the memory rewrite reflex drives conflict. Lovers fight over who said what, friends part ways over memories that no longer match. Wars have started, families have splintered, lives have changed, and all over recollections that feel like absolute truth, but are in fact subjective scripts rewritten over and over by emotion and need. There are even stranger effects. The Mandela effect, a phenomenon where large groups of people misremember the same detail, shows that memory isn't just personal. Collective memory is malleable, shaped by stories, rumors, media, and repetition. Millions remember movie quotes that never existed, events that never happened, and yet argue fiercely for their reality. It's not delusion. It's the memory rewrite reflex, operating at the scale of society. Your own mind is not immune. Think back to a childhood fear, a teenage mistake, a moment of pride. Ask someone who was there. Listen to their version. Notice the gaps, the overlaps, the contradictions. Each of you has rewritten the story, not to deceive, but to survive, to explain, to feel. Because memory's true loyalty is not to truth, but to the emotional needs of the self. Is there a way to resist the rewrite? Not completely, but awareness is the first step. When you feel the surge of memory, ask yourself, is this what really happened? Or is this the version I need? How much of my certainty is evidence, and how much is emotion? Be gentle with yourself, but be curious. Seek out other perspectives. Compare your memories with photos, letters, recordings. Let the cracks in your story teach you humility, not shame. Because in the end, the memory rewrite reflex is not a defect. It is part of what makes you human, capable of healing, of hope, of myth-making. But it is also the source of endless confusion and pain. If you can learn to hold your memories lightly, to trust the feeling but question the facts, you may find more freedom than certainty. You may learn to forgive yourself and others for stories that don't quite match up. And you may see that sometimes, the most vivid memory, the one you swear is true, is only a reflection of the heart, not of history. Memory isn't a perfect mirror. It's a stained glass window, colored by longing, shaped by fear, and lit up by emotion. The picture it paints is beautiful, but the truth, if you dare to look for it, is often found in the places the light does not reach. Observer, contamination effect. You were taught that observing is passive, that you can stand at a distance, look at the world, and stay untouched, that you can examine your own mind, your own past, your own choices, as if you were a scientist with a clipboard, collecting data, untouched by the experiment. But that's a lie, because the act of observing always leaves fingerprints, on the world, on yourself. It's never clean, never neutral. The moment you look at something, anything, you change it, and it changes you. Physics knows this. In the quantum world, the observer effect means that the simple act of measurement alters the outcome. A particle's behavior, its very existence, is shifted just by being watched. What you see is never what would have happened if you hadn't been there. But the effect runs deeper. It isn't just for subatomic mysteries. It's written into the fabric of human life. Every time you return to a memory, you change it. Soften the edges, sharpen the pain, rewrite the dialogue. But you also change yourself. You become the version of you that keeps returning. If you revisit a betrayal, you become more guarded, more suspicious. If you obsess over a lost love, you become the echo of longing, always reaching backward. The attention you give to a feeling, a thought, a possibility, it shapes you, molds you. You grow into the pattern of your own focus. This is the observer contamination effect. You are not a spectator in your own life. Every act of attention is an act of creation. When you watch yourself in the mirror, really watch, you become more self-conscious, more rehearsed. When you obsessively check your flaws, you become someone who lives through the lens of criticism. When you fixate on pain, you deepen the groove of suffering. When you return to joy, you open yourself to hope. Your attention isn't just light, it's sculptor's hands. This effect doesn't stop at the self. Think about relationships. The moment you scrutinize a partner, you don't just see them, you push them to become what you expect. You anticipate disappointment, and they start to feel it. You watch for betrayal, and trust erodes. You focus on their beauty, their kindness, and you call out the best in them. We are all mirrors for each other, warped by what we notice. Even in the world outside, the act of watching shapes reality. Crowds behave differently under surveillance. Creativity withers under constant scrutiny. A child glows or shrinks depending on the attention they receive. The experiment is never separate from the observer. The story is never just about what happened. It's about who was watching and how they watched. But here's the twist. Most people never realize they're shaping themselves. They think their thoughts are accidental. Their habits, their moods, their anxieties, random weather blowing in from nowhere. But your attention is a current, slowly wearing grooves in your mind. The stories you tell, the memories you replay, the emotions you indulge, these become the architecture of yourself. So what happens when you realize you are not just observing, but becoming? When you notice that the pain you revisit, the flaws you count, the doubts you nourish, these are not just passing shadows, but bricks in the house of who you are. You get a choice. You can keep revisiting the same rooms and become a ghost of your own attention. Or you can choose, deliberately, bravely, where to shine the light. You can decide to notice beauty, to collect moments of kindness, to replay courage instead of regret. You can become someone who observes hope, and so becomes hopeful. It's not magic. It's biology. It's psychology. Neurons that fire together. wire together. Patterns of attention become patterns of identity. But beware, to change your focus is to risk the loss of what's familiar. Pain can be a home. Self-doubt can be an identity. The story you've watched 1,000 times might feel safer than the one you've never seen, but you are not meant to be an echo. You are meant to be a witness and a creator. So, the next time you catch yourself observing yourself, your life, the world, ask, am I just seeing, or am I shaping? Am I stuck in a loop of attention that keeps me small? Or am I choosing, moment by moment, to become someone new? Because you are not the person you were yesterday. You are the sum of everything you've paid attention to, and everything you will dare to see next. The observer and the observed are never separate, and in that collision, the next version of you is born. Identity repetition, ritual. You wake up and choose your clothes, your words, your gestures, small acts repeated day after day. You speak with a certain tone, hold your body in a certain way, laugh at certain jokes, believe certain ideas. Over time, these actions accumulate, folding themselves into your sense of self. You think, this is who I am. But what if the truth is darker? What if you're not being yourself, but becoming someone you never truly wanted to be? This is the identity repetition ritual, the invisible cycle where your identity is forged not from genuine desire or authentic self, but from pressure, expectation, and habit. Repetition builds the mask, but authenticity lies beneath. From childhood, you learn what's expected. At school, at home, in society, you pick up behaviors that please, conform, survive. Maybe you smile when you're tired. Maybe you stay silent when you're hurt. Maybe you adopt beliefs because they shield you from conflict or isolation. These actions aren't free choices. They're responses to pressure, but repeated enough, they become second nature. And your mind, desperate for coherence, stitches them into a narrative. This is who I am. The trap is that repetition feels like truth. Your brain uses patterns to create stability. Acting consistently helps reduce anxiety. It carves identity out of chaos. But this identity is a performance, a ritual, a series of echoes. It may look solid to others, and sometimes even to yourself, but inside, it feels hollow. The harder you act the role, the more you forget the script's author. Psychologists call this self-perception theory. Your mind infers who you are by watching what you do. You don't first decide who you are and then act. You act, and then you believe you are that actor. The problem? When actions come from obligation, not passion, you're building a self from imitation, not intuition. This cycle explains why people feel trapped in identities they secretly resent. The good child who's always pleasing, the strong one who never shows weakness, the logical thinker who denies feelings. Their identities aren't chosen. They're rehearsed. And the rehearsal erodes authenticity. It's why breaking free is so hard. Changing identity means disrupting the ritual, risking discomfort, conflict, rejection. It means saying no to old roles that once kept you safe but now suffocate. It means stepping into uncertainty without a script. But there's freedom in that. When you loosen the grip of repetition, you invite authenticity. You create space to discover desires untainted by obligation. You start asking, who am I beyond the roles I play? What do I want when no one's watching? Authenticity is not perfection. It's not a fixed point. It's a process of peeling layers shaped by ritual to reveal the raw self beneath. It's messy, vulnerable, evolving. So, the next time you catch yourself acting out a pattern, pause. Notice whether the action springs from your true desire or from pressure you've long accepted. Listen to the quiet voice beneath the script. It might be faint, but it's real. Because identity built on repetition is a mask. Identity born from authenticity is a living flame, and only when you let the ritual fall away can you truly find who you are. Attention, prioritization hack. You think you see the world as it is. You believe your attention is your own, that what you notice and remember is what really matters. But attention is not freedom. It's a filter, a lens shaped by forces you rarely see. What you pay attention to is the raw material of your reality. But the truth is, you did not choose what matters. Your focus has been hijacked by algorithms, by trauma, by fear. Imagine a spotlight in a pitch-black theater. The beam lands on one actor, one gesture, one moment. Everything else fades into darkness. That's your mind, scanning a world of infinite data, but only seeing the sliver illuminated by attention. And whoever controls the spotlight controls the play. You wake up in the morning and reach for your phone. Instantly, your attention is directed, not by you, but by 1,000 engineers optimizing for clicks, engagement, outrage. The algorithm decides what you see. Headlines that provoke, images that trigger, stories that addict. What you notice, what feels urgent, important, true, is shaped not by your values, but by invisible calculations. You scroll and scroll, thinking you're exploring the world, when really the world is being narrowed to fit the design of someone else. But algorithms are not the only programmers. Trauma is a master coder, too. When you've been hurt by loss, betrayal, neglect, your brain learns to search for threat, to anticipate pain, to notice every signal that danger might return. You walk into a room and your senses zero in on the frown, the silence, the body language that echoes old wounds. The good moments blur into the background. The safe faces fade. Attention becomes a survival tool, and your world grows sharp-edged, colored by what you fear most. Fear itself is the oldest algorithm. Evolution shaped your mind to prioritize threat, to leap to the sound of breaking glass, the flash of teeth, the hint of danger in a stranger's eyes. But now, the world is filled with manufactured alarms, constant notifications, endless crises, news engineered to keep you on edge. You notice the worst, remember the pain, replay the risk, because that's how you survived. But what you attend to grows. What you ignore withers. Your reality becomes a harvest of anxiety, even as beauty and safety live just outside the edge of the beam. Attention is not neutral. What you focus on multiplies. Neuroscientists call this the attentional spotlight, the mechanism by which your brain selects a few details to process deeply, while the rest of reality fades to gray. But what determines the spotlight's direction? Sometimes it's choice, but more often it's habit, memory, outside pressure. You notice your flaws, but not your strengths. You replay the argument, but not the kindness. You obsess over what might go wrong and overlook what's already going right. Each act of noticing rewires the brain, carving grooves of focus that become harder and harder to escape. You build a reality that mirrors your attention, not your intentions. Think of social media. You post a photo, and the likes become your metric for value. Your attention prioritizes numbers, not moments. Your reality is reduced to what gets approved by others, while the messy, unshared, truly meaningful moments drift by, unrecorded, unremembered. The algorithm of society tells you what to care about, and your focus obeys. Or think of your relationships. If you grew up in chaos, your attention scans for the first hint of tension. You brace for conflict, miss the gestures of love. If you lived through scarcity, you notice every lack, every missed opportunity, while abundance sits quietly unrecognized. Your attention is not an accident. It's a survival strategy, a wound, a script written before you could choose. But attention is also a superpower, if you learn to wield it, because whatever you focus on becomes your reality. If you train your attention to seek beauty, to savor moments, to notice gratitude, the world becomes richer. If you learn to pause, to redirect the beam, to let go of the algorithm's suggestions, you reclaim your mind. You become the director of your own play. The hack, then, is not to fight for more attention, but to become aware of what is guiding it, to ask, who turned my head? What am I scanning for, and why? Is this my focus or someone else's design? Awareness is the start of freedom. You can train your attention like a muscle. Meditation, journaling, deliberate gratitude, these are not self-help cliches, but exercises in taking back the spotlight. Every time you redirect your focus, you rewire your reality. You weaken the grip of old fears, break the addiction to external algorithms, and make space for what truly matters. And when you fail, when your attention is hijacked, and your mind fills with noise, and the world feels like a storm, remember, it's not weakness. It's design. It's history. It's survival. But you can start again. You can widen the beam. You can seek the details that bring you peace, joy, connection. You can choose again and again where to point the light. Because the world you live in is not just what happens to you. It's what you notice, what you return to, what you let matter. Attention is reality's hack, and you are not powerless. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by noise, by negativity, by anxiety, pause. Ask yourself, what have I been trained to notice? Whose story am I living? And how can I widen my focus, reclaim the beam, and build a reality worth inhabiting? You may not control every thought, every trigger, every algorithm, but you can begin to shape your attention, and in shaping your attention, you shape your world. Desire-driven lens shift. It starts as a simple wanting, maybe a hope, a hunger, a wish you can't shake. You want something, a job, a lover, a second chance, a sign from the universe, a moment of redemption, or just the feeling of being chosen. You want it so badly that you start to see it everywhere, feel it in every silence, read it into every glance. The world becomes a treasure hunt for proof that what you crave is already coming. This is the desire-driven lens shift. Desire, left unchecked, doesn't just shape your future, it rewrites your present. It colors every detail, reframes every conversation, transforms every ordinary coincidence into a secret signal. Your longing doesn't just wait quietly. It takes the wheel. It grabs the paintbrush. It starts editing the facts before your eyes. You walk through the world with this lens, and suddenly everything feels personal. The song on the radio seems meant for you. The stranger's smile is a sign. The message you've been waiting for is always about to arrive. You see patterns in the randomness. You hear invitations in the silence. Reality becomes a mirror that reflects back the shape of your hope. But what you don't see is that this mirror is warped. You become a detective of your own dreams, gathering evidence for a story that only exists in your head. If someone looks your way, it must mean they're interested. If your boss is vague, it must mean a promotion is coming. If you see repeating numbers, it must be destiny whispering that you're on the right path. Your mind, desperate for comfort, turns every ambiguous moment into affirmation. Desire does not ask permission. It bends logic, stretches time, makes facts flexible. It ignores the warnings, edits out the contradictions. Anything that fits the longing is highlighted, replayed, obsessed over. Anything that contradicts it is blurred, forgotten, explained away. And the more you want, the more convincing the illusion becomes. Think about love, the most famous trickster of all. You want someone so fiercely that you start reading meaning into every text, every pause, every choice of word. You hear maybe as yes. You take later as soon. You ignore the red flags and see only green lights. Desire blinds you to reality and projects your fantasy onto another person, making it almost impossible to see them as they truly are. Or ambition. You want success so badly that you interpret every compliment as a step up, every minor setback as part of the journey, every opportunity as a sign that your time is near. You see doors opening everywhere, even as some quietly close behind you. The world becomes a canvas you've already painted with your desire. This isn't foolishness, it's human. The mind is built to turn longing into focus, focus into energy, and energy into action. It's how we survive. It's how we move forward, fight for what matters, endure when things get hard. But the shadow side is real. When desire runs wild, it can build castles out of clouds. It can turn warning signs into encouragement, push you into chasing ghosts, and leave you stranded in fantasies that were never possible. It can make you see love where there is only loneliness. It can make you see progress where there is only inertia. Desire is powerful, but unchecked, it makes you a stranger in your own life. You start missing the real signals. You forget how to see what's really there. You're always waiting for the next hint, the next confirmation, the next high. Reality becomes a scavenger hunt with no finish line, and the world will feed your longing if it can. Algorithms will echo your hopes. Marketers will promise what you crave. Spiritual gurus will sell you signs. The lens grows thicker, the illusion stronger. You keep searching for proof that you are getting closer, and every day it gets harder to know what's real. So how do you break the spell? You start by noticing the lens itself. You catch yourself in the act of interpreting, searching, confirming. You ask, is this real, or is it just what I want? Am I seeing the world, or just my own longing reflected back at me? You start to trust the facts that resist your desire, the patterns that don't fit the story. You look for the people who are honest, even when it hurts. You make space for disappointment, ambiguity, patience, and slowly, the lens begins to thin. Reality sharpens. The world returns to its original colors, sometimes less dazzling, but always more solid. You learn to hold desire without letting it rewrite your world. You learn to want fiercely but see clearly, to let longing move you, but not blind you. Because if you don't, you risk living in a world of echoes, a reality made of wishes instead of truth. And the truth, even when it's hard, is the only ground worth standing on. Goal-generated meaning filter. Every great achievement starts with a goal, a line drawn in your mind's future, a promise to yourself that you will get there no matter what. It's powerful, even intoxicating. Suddenly, life seems charged with purpose. You wake up and the world feels sharper, every moment humming with the possibility of progress. But beneath this surge of determination is something stranger and more subtle, a mental filter that doesn't just help you spot opportunities, it invents them. This is the goal-generated meaning filter, the brain's built-in mechanism that, once you set a mission, starts pulling meaning out of thin air, attaching significance to moments that might otherwise have passed unnoticed. It happens automatically, quietly, invisibly. The moment you decide, I will run a marathon, or I will build this business, or I will find love, your brain begins a process psychologists call attentional bias. You become hyper-aware of anything that might advance your cause. Articles about running catch your eye. You overhear conversations that seem strangely relevant. A chance encounter feels fated. Patterns appear where before there was only noise. Coincidences feel like clues. Every random event, every small victory, every setback gets woven into the narrative of your mission. At first, this filter is helpful. It helps you persevere. It turns the world into a treasure hunt for tools, advice, and allies. When you're training for that marathon, every healthy meal, every new route, every word of encouragement feels important, fuel for your journey. If your goal is to build a business, every new contact, every idea, every article you read becomes another piece of the puzzle. Even setbacks feel significant, as if they were designed to test you, to make you stronger for what lies ahead. But the goal-generated meaning filter doesn't stop at usefulness. It keeps going, bending reality until your quest begins to distort your perception of the world. You start seeing signs everywhere, even when they don't exist. A song on the radio becomes a message. A random number feels like a code. A stranger's advice, meant for someone else, suddenly seems like destiny speaking directly to you. You begin connecting dots that were never meant to be connected, finding confirmation in coincidences, and dismissing anything that doesn't fit the story you're building. This filter can be both blessing and curse. On one hand, it can propel you through doubt, pain, and fatigue, keeping you on track when logic says to quit. It can help you ignore distractions, focus your energy, and persist where others give up. Great inventors, athletes, and artists have all ridden the energy of this filter to remarkable heights, fueled by the belief that every moment is meaningful, every obstacle a signpost. But it can also lead you astray. The more invested you become in your goal, the more desperate you are for meaning. When progress slows, you begin to see setbacks as omens, obstacles as warnings, and every random event as a coded message from the universe. Superstition grows in the soil of determination. You may start to ignore important facts, dismiss wise counsel, or fixate on details that have no actual relevance, simply because your filter makes them feel important. In extreme cases, the goal-generated meaning filter can spiral into obsession. History is full of cautionary tales. Explorers who died chasing mirages, scientists who bent data to fit their theories, lovers who mistook every glance for fate. The world narrows to a tunnel, and everything outside the mission fades. Reality itself reshapes to match the goal, and you risk losing touch with what is truly real. Even in everyday life, this filter shapes the stories you tell yourself. You remember the moment you met a best friend as destined, the coincidence that got you a job as fate, the setback that forced you to change paths as meant to be. The filter builds a myth around your journey, editing out randomness and painting meaning onto every twist and turn. The goal becomes a magnet, and your mind collects iron filings from the whole landscape, drawing them close, forging a new pattern from chaos. So, how do you use the filter without being trapped by it? First, notice it. Notice when your mind starts pulling meaning from noise, when coincidence starts to feel like prophecy, when the world seems to be sending you messages tailored for your journey. Ask yourself, is this event actually connected to my goal, or am I just hungry for significance? Am I seeing what's there, or what I want to see. Second, stay flexible. Allow yourself to adapt your goal, to question your mission, to change course if new evidence demands it. The filter can blind you to dangers and opportunities outside your chosen path. Step back. Look for facts as well as feelings. Finally, be grateful for the filter. It is the engine of hope, the heart of ambition. It turns drudgery into adventure, randomness into story, the ordinary into the extraordinary. It can carry you farther than talent or luck alone. Just remember, the meaning you find is real because it moves you, but it's not always proof of destiny. Sometimes, it's just your mind helping you make sense of the long road ahead. The goal-generated meaning filter is a gift and a warning. Use it wisely, and you can build a life filled with purpose and passion. But always remember, the world is bigger than your story, and sometimes a coincidence is just a coincidence, even if it feels like the universe is cheering you on. Ancestral trauma encoding. You wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, breath caught in your throat. You're safe, but your body is telling you something different. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes grief, sometimes a sense of danger with no face, no memory, no story you can trace. You wonder, where did this come from? You search your mind for reasons, for explanations, for the moment in your own life when the shadow began. But what if it didn't begin with you? What if the fear in your bones is older than your birth? What if your sadness isn't just yours, but an echo carried through blood, through bone, through memory coded in the body? This is ancestral trauma encoding, a phenomenon science is only beginning to map, but humanity has always felt. The truth that some wounds aren't just personal, they're inherited. You are not just the sum of your choices. You are the living archive of generations. Your DNA carries more than the recipe for your hair, your eyes, your smile. It holds the blueprints for survival, the record of what your ancestors endured: famine, war, exile, betrayal, silence, loss. And not just the stories that were told, but the reactions etched into bodies trying to survive. Bodies that braced for disaster, that flinched at danger, that learned to mistrust the world. You are the child of survivors. Your panic, your suspicion, your deep and sudden sorrow, they may be rational responses to a world you never knew. You find yourself overreacting or underreacting, or unable to let go of a fear that never made sense in your own life. That's not weakness, that's memory, older than memory. Science calls it epigenetic inheritance. When trauma is powerful enough, it leaves marks on genes, chemical switches that change how DNA is expressed, not by rewriting the code, but by deciding which lines get read. It's as if the body writes a warning on its own instructions. Stay alert. Trust no one. Danger is everywhere. That warning doesn't vanish when the trauma ends. It gets passed on. In studies with mice, researchers shocked animals whenever they smelled a specific scent. The next generation, never shocked, never exposed, still panicked when they encountered the same smell. Fear encoded, passed down. In humans, descendants of people who survived famines, the Holocaust, slavery, colonial violence, show elevated levels of stress hormones, higher rates of anxiety, more fragile immune systems. Even without knowing the stories, their bodies remember the lessons. Hunger is coming, pain is near, stay ready. Your family may not talk about what happened. Whole generations can try to bury the pain, never speaking of what they saw, what they lost. But the body doesn't forget. You inherit not just the jawline or the temper, but the survival strategies. Freeze, flee, fight, please. You learn to scan the world for threats no one else can see. Sometimes it saves you. Sometimes it cages you, and you feel alone in it. Isolated by fears and reactions you cannot trace. But you are not alone. This is why certain family patterns never seem to break. Why some wounds linger even after the world has changed. Why cycles of addiction, shame, anger, and silence move down the line, generation to generation, until someone finally looks back and asks, whose pain am I carrying? But awareness is not the end. It's the beginning. You are not doomed to relive your ancestors' suffering. The same science that revealed the trauma's code also reveals its potential to be rewritten. The body is plastic. The mind can heal. New experiences, new stories, acts of love and safety, mindfulness and care, all can shift the epigenetic script. Healing isn't just for you, it's for those who come after. This is your task. to witness what was hidden, to feel what was never spoken, to say, it ends here. You can honor the pain without passing it on. You can carry the wisdom, the resilience, the lessons, and leave the terror behind. When you heal, you send a signal forward in time. It's safe now. You don't have to be afraid. Your body is a map of worlds you never saw. It remembers storms you never weathered, wars you never fought, heartbreaks you never named, and you, alive in this moment, have the power to end the cycle, to offer a new story to the future, one of courage, of compassion, of freedom from shadows. You are not just what happened to you. You are what you choose to heal. And in that healing, you become the ancestor someone else needed all along. Expectation-induced hallucination. You stand at the edge of a moment, your mind fixated on a single outcome. You expect it so intensely, whether it's a smile from a stranger, the sound of a phone ringing, or a sudden movement in the shadows, that your brain begins to fill in what it craves. Suddenly you see the smile before it arrives. You hear the ringing phone in an empty room. You glimpse a figure where none stands. These aren't tricks or glitches. They are expectation-induced hallucinations, powerful illusions born entirely within the mind. They feel as real as touch or sight, but their origin is internal, shaped by desire, fear, and belief. Expectation-induced hallucination reveals the astonishing ability of the brain to construct sensory experiences based not on external stimuli, but on the strength of anticipation. The mind doesn't passively wait for the world to deliver data. It actively predicts, simulates, and sometimes fabricates, blurring the lines between what's out there and what's in here. Neuroscientists explain this through the brain's predictive coding model. Your brain constantly generates expectations about incoming sensory information, comparing them to actual input. When the input is ambiguous, weak, or absent, your brain relies more heavily on its predictions. If your expectation is strong enough, it can override reality, causing you to perceive things that aren't present. Consider the classic example of a ringing phone that never actually rings. You're waiting for a call. Your ears strain. The room is silent. Yet, in the stillness, a faint ring emerges, real enough to make you reach for the device. But no one is calling. Your mind produced the sound to match your yearning. This phenomenon is not confined to sound. Visual hallucinations can arise when expectation saturates perception. Soldiers in battle have reported phantom shapes in the fog. People who anxiously await a loved one sometimes glimpse their face in a crowd that's empty. The brain's desire to confirm hopes or alleviate uncertainty creates sensory mirages. Expectation-induced hallucinations also play a role in placebo effects. When you believe a treatment will work, your brain can generate sensory and physiological changes consistent with healing. Pain fades, symptoms ease, not because of the medicine, but because of the mind's powerful expectations reshaping experience. But this mechanism is a double-edged sword. While it can comfort, it can also deceive. It can reinforce false beliefs, fuel paranoia, or perpetuate misunderstandings. When your senses betray you by inventing confirmation, it becomes difficult to discern reality from illusion. This is why skepticism and mindfulness matter. Being aware of your expectations and how they shape perception allows you to step back, to question whether what you see or hear is truly there or a creation of your mind's own design. Expectation-induced hallucination teaches us that perception is not a mirror but a canvas. It's painted by the brushstrokes of hope, fear, and desire. And sometimes, the brightest colors come not from the world, but from within. So, the next time you're sure you heard a whisper, saw a shadow, or felt a presence, pause. Ask yourself, is this real, or is my mind filling in the gaps? Because sometimes the most vivid experiences aren't about the world outside. They're about the world inside you. Narrative necessity. Override. Life refuses to play by the rules of story. The world is made of chaos, accident, fragments, half-beginnings, abrupt endings, random collisions with no arc, no meaning, no why. But your mind can't accept that. It aches for order, for connection, for a line through the noise. And so you reach for a story, any story, to hold the pieces together. You crave structure so badly that you invent causes, motives, plots, narrative necessity overriding the truth of chaos. You narrate the lie until it lives. This isn't a flaw, it's survival. The mind is a storyteller by design, Our ancestors scanned the darkness for patterns, seeking meaning in random events, building tales to make sense of thunder, hunger, loss. A story gave shape to fear, a beginning and end to pain. Even now, the craving hasn't faded. If anything, it's grown more urgent in a world saturated with noise. You experience something painful, a breakup, a failure, a loss. Your mind can't leave it formless. It spins a narrative. It happened for a reason. I wasn't good enough. They always meant to leave. The universe is teaching me a lesson. You invent motives for others, arcs for yourself, threads where there are only tangled knots. And as you repeat these stories, out loud, to friends, in the quiet of your own mind, they harden. What began as fiction becomes a kind of memory. The story rewrites the facts. You see it everywhere. The person who survives an illness and calls themselves chosen. The athlete who loses and decides, I was meant for something greater. Even tragedy is drafted into the plot. He died so young, but his life had a purpose. We refuse to let chaos stand. We overwrite it with story. But stories aren't just how we remember. They're how we decide. You meet someone new, and you instantly cast them in a role. Hero, rival, lover, threat. You build a plot before the first chapter is even written. Every action, every glance is woven into your private script. The person themselves can't compete with the narrative you've built around them. You miss what's real, chasing what fits the plot. And you do it to yourself too. You wake up and decide, I'm the kind of person who never finishes things, or I'm destined to fail at love. You invent motives for your moods, arcs for your history. I do this because I was hurt as a child. I can't trust people because I was betrayed. Sometimes the stories help you make sense of yourself, give you comfort. But sometimes they trap you, keeping you stuck in a plot line that isn't yours, repeating an old scene when you could have changed the script. Even your memories aren't immune. You remember a childhood argument, a parent's absence, a single cruel word, and your mind frames it, edits it, connects it to every disappointment that came after. A minor moment becomes the secret origin story of your pain. The narrative tightens, growing more persuasive with every retelling. Why do we do this? Because chaos terrifies us. Unpredictability threatens us. We want the comfort of knowing there's a reason, a motive, a hidden thread pulling the events of our lives toward meaning. Randomness is unbearable. Story is sanctuary. But there's a danger here, a shadow in the comfort. When you narrate the lie often enough, it begins to live. Your invented motives become self-fulfilling prophecies. You push away people you've cast as villains. You sabotage opportunities because they don't fit the tragedy you've scripted for yourself. You twist facts to keep the story alive, even if it hurts you. This is the narrative necessity override, the point where craving story becomes more important than seeing truth. You lose sight of the world as it is, seeing only the version that fits the plot in your head. Whole societies fall into this trap. We tell ourselves stories about nations, enemies, destiny, progress. We edit history to fit an arc, ignore data that contradicts the plot. Our myths become our shackles, our scripts, our prisons. But here's the strange mercy. You can rewrite. You can question the script. You can notice the craving for narrative and ask, is this story true or just comforting? Am I inventing motives, inventing patterns, inventing meaning? Because the truth is too random to bear? You can step outside the plot. You can let some things remain unexplained, some people uncast, some endings unfinished. You can live in the noise without reaching for a line through it. You can let truth be as wild, unpredictable, and beautiful as it really is. It takes courage to let go of the plot, to release the lie you've narrated into life, to stand in the open chaos, unframed, unprotected, and say, I don't know why. Maybe there is no why, and that's okay. Because the craving for story is human, but the freedom to step outside it, that is where you find yourself, unscripted and real at last. Ritual reality. Lockdown. You wake up, and without thinking, you reach for your phone. Or maybe you stumble to the bathroom, brush your teeth in the same pattern, put on your left sock before your right, pour coffee in your favorite mug, stand by the window, check the weather. You do these things almost unconsciously, every day, in the same order. It feels mundane, routine, hardly worth noticing, but these small acts are more than habits. They are anchors. invisible chains that tether your mind to reality. Each ritual is a signal. You are here. You are safe. You are you. This is Ritual Reality Lockdown, the daily pattern of rituals you perform to stabilize the shifting ground of your identity. You may not notice them until something breaks the sequence, until you skip the coffee, forget the shower, lose the mug, change your route to work. Suddenly, a ripple moves through your day. The air feels thicker. Your mind stutters. You feel less like yourself. Why does this happen? Because your rituals are not just preferences, they are survival code. The mind is a chaotic system, always in motion, flooded with memories, fears, desires, doubts. Rituals slice through the noise, offering a predictable rhythm, a map for being alive. Each act, however small, tells the brain, the world is safe. The world makes sense. You know who you are. Break the ritual, and the spell is broken. It starts in childhood. A lucky pencil for tests. The way you organize your room. The bedtime story. The favorite blanket. Small repetitions that build a sanctuary of sameness, a fortress of comfort against the unknown. As you grow, the rituals change. Coffee instead of cocoa, a gym routine instead of a lullaby. But the principle never leaves. You build your reality on the foundation of the familiar. In a world where so much is out of your control, ritual is the last thing you can command. The shower that washes away yesterday, the careful way you tie your shoes, the exact amount of milk in your tea, the walk to the bus stop, the playlist for your commute, the seat you always choose. If someone interrupts this sequence, you don't just feel annoyed. You feel disoriented. The world tilts, your reflection blurs. For a moment, your identity shakes loose. The mind's need for ritual is ancient. Before clocks, before calendars, before cities, humans marked time and tamed fear with ceremonies. Light a fire, sing the song, tell the story. Rituals gave structure to chaos, marking the passage of seasons, births, deaths, and dreams. They stitched together tribes, families, souls. Today the ceremonies are smaller, but the need is not. Without ritual, the boundaries between days melt away. Grief becomes endless. Anxiety becomes ambient. You become untethered, floating through the hours. It's not laziness or superstition. It's a neurological lifeline. Rituals offer islands of certainty in an ocean of unpredictability. It's why, when your life is falling apart, you cling to small routines. You clean obsessively. You make lists. You repeat mantras. When you lose someone, you cook their favorite meal, visit their favorite place, wear their old scarf. You hold on because the ritual is a rope, and without it, you fear you might disappear. But the spell can work both ways. Too much ritual, and the lockdown becomes a prison. Rigid routines can ossify into obsession. The quest for stability can tip into compulsion. The mind mistakes comfort for safety, and soon you cannot change, cannot grow. The ritual, once a lifeline, becomes a cage. Still, most of the time, it is ritual that saves you. It is the small daily acts that restore your story, stitch your memory, rebuild your sense of I. The familiar scent of soap, the click of a lock, the first sip of tea. Each is a declaration. I am here. I am still me. The world is still mine to touch, taste, and order. So notice the rituals you build. Respect their magic. See how they hold you steady when everything else wobbles. And when you lose one, when the routine is broken, the object lost, the time stolen, do not panic. You are not lost forever. You can build new anchors, new rituals, new signals to the mind that you are still here. Because reality is not a fixed place. It's an ongoing negotiation, a dance between chaos and comfort. And ritual, your ritual, is the music that guides your steps. Don't underestimate it. Don't dismiss it as trivial. Your daily rituals are the secret architecture of your sanity. Break them and the world shakes. Restore them and you remember who you are. Perceived attention. Paradox. Imagine yourself standing alone in an empty room, the silence heavy, the lights just a little too bright. No footsteps echo in the hall. No voices drift through the walls. You know, logically, certainly, that nobody is watching. Yet, somewhere in the back of your mind, a question stirs. What if someone is? You straighten your posture, you smooth your shirt, you hesitate before scratching your nose, before humming that tune, before letting your face slip into a private frown. It doesn't matter that you're alone. The feeling of being observed has changed your behavior. This is the perceived attention paradox, the strange, powerful truth that the mere belief of being watched can shape your reality as strongly as the gaze itself. It starts as a survival instinct. For thousands of years, your ancestors lived in tribes, in villages, in tight clusters where reputation and belonging meant safety, food, and life itself. Being seen meant being part of the group, and being seen doing the wrong thing meant exclusion, danger, even death. So, your brain evolved a sensitivity to eyes, to scrutiny, to that prickling sense that, at any moment, you could be evaluated. In today's world, the stakes may have changed, but the feeling remains. Security cameras dot city corners, mirrors hang in stores, apps track your every scroll and tap. Even when the camera's off, you act as if it's on. You check your words on social media, rehearse your smile for photos, edit your thoughts for potential listeners. The outside world, the real and the imagined, has become an audience, and in front of an audience, you cannot help but perform. But the paradox goes deeper. Studies show that even illusory surveillance changes us. Place a picture of eyes above a donation jar, and people give more. Tell workers they might be monitored, and productivity spikes. Even in an empty lab, participants act more honestly when they think they're being recorded. The watcher doesn't have to exist. The possibility is enough. This imagined surveillance isn't always negative. Sometimes it makes you better. You work harder. You strive to be kinder, more disciplined, more thoughtful, because you believe someone might see. This is the social glue that keeps streets cleaner, conversations politer, and crowds under control. The world functions on invisible eyes, but it can also distort you. The more you internalize the gaze, the more you begin to censor your true self. You laugh a little less loudly. You hide your quirks. You abandon ideas that are too weird, too raw, too risky. You live in anticipation of judgment, approval, or outrage. In time, the imagined audience becomes a tyrant, always whispering, "Someone will see this. Someone will judge." You start to live for the record, not for reality. Social media amplifies this paradox. Every post, every comment, every photo feels like a performance. Who is watching? Who is judging? You tailor your persona to please, to provoke, to belong. Even your private moments are shadowed by the possibility that they could become public, recorded, reposted, dissected by strangers. The result? Even in solitude, you are rarely truly alone. And yet, the paradox cuts both ways. Sometimes you find freedom in being seen. You take a stand, speak a truth, share a pain, and discover that the watcher isn't always hostile. Sometimes it's a friend, a stranger who understands, a tribe you didn't know you had. Sometimes imagined attention becomes real connection, real empathy, real change. So, how do you live with the perceived attention paradox? With awareness. Notice when you are performing for an invisible crowd. Ask yourself, would I act the same if no one were watching? When does the possibility of surveillance help you grow? And when does it make you smaller, more fearful, less yourself? When do you shrink under imaginary eyes, and when do you shine? The truth is, you are always in between, part audience, part actor, sometimes alone, sometimes seen. Your reality is shaped by both the gaze and the ghost of the gaze. Surveillance, real or imagined, becomes a silent partner in the story of who you are. But sometimes, to reclaim yourself, you must step out of the spotlight, even if the audience is only in your head. Close the imaginary curtain. Take a breath. Let your shoulders drop. In that moment, if only for a heartbeat, you may discover who you are when nobody is watching, and realize that in the paradox of attention, the truest witness is always yourself. Social image compression. You're born with infinite dimensions, memories, dreams, impulses, wounds, contradictions, colors that only you can name. But from the first day you step into the world, the pressure begins. Simplify, edit, compress. Make yourself smaller, easier to process. Make yourself fit. You learn which stories to share and which to hide, which emotions are acceptable, which ones draw blank stares, or worse, judgment. You start to realize your real self in all its depth is overwhelming, Too much for a single screen, a single introduction, a single moment at a party or a meeting or a first date. So you select. You smooth the edges. You take the full, high-definition chaos of your inner world and compress it into a version that fits into the space you're given. Maybe you become the funny one, or the smart one. Maybe you decide it's safer to be quiet. Maybe you pick a trait, confident, agreeable, mysterious, and make it your social avatar. Not because you're a liar, but because you sense, almost instinctively, that the crowd can only handle so much. So you become a compressed file. Easy to transmit, easy to open, easy to share. The complicated self, your heartbreaks, your private terrors, your weird interests, your late-night questions, gets zipped up and left behind, saved for some theoretical time when someone really wants to see you as you are. But over time, something strange happens. The compressed image, the version you show, starts to gain more traction than the real thing. It becomes easier to play the role than to improvise. You start to anticipate what people want, what they'll like, what will get the response you need. You get good at it. You forget you're even doing it. Social media amplifies this compression. Every post, every photo, every about me is another round of editing, cropping, filtering. You become a collection of highlights, a string of palatable facts. You learn to pose, not just for the camera, but for life itself. And people respond to this version of you. They approve, they follow, they promote, they invite you back. Not for your depth, but for your display. It feels like acceptance, but it's thinner than air. They love the compressed file. The rest of you, your messiness, your contradictions, your changes of heart, starts to feel like baggage. Even to you. At some point, you might try to show more, to unzip, to open the archive. You hint at sadness, reveal an oddity, confess a doubt. And maybe, sometimes, you're met with real understanding, but often you see confusion, discomfort. People want the version they recognize, the one that takes up less space. You feel the pressure to retreat. You wonder, is the real me too much? Is the compressed me all anyone will ever want? You begin to perform, even when you're alone. The persona seeps into your thoughts, your choices, your identity. The flat version becomes home. The tragedy is, the more you compress, the more you lose the ability to decompress. You forget the language for your own depths. You lose touch with the questions that don't have easy answers. You become anxious, restless, lonely, in a crowd or in front of a screen, wondering why connection always feels one click away, but never real. But here's the truth. Everyone is compressing. Everyone is terrified of being too much, too strange, too uncontainable. We're all sending zipped files, hoping someone will want the full download, but we keep meeting other compressed selves and calling it love. Real intimacy, real belonging, requires decompression. It demands awkward silences, unfiltered stories, unedited sadness and joy. It needs space for contradiction, room for surprise. It's slower, harder, riskier. It asks you to risk being ignored, misunderstood, even rejected. But it's the only place where you get to be whole. So next time you feel the urge to simplify, to compress, to shrink into a pixel-perfect version of yourself, pause, ask, what am I leaving out? Who might I become if I showed up in full resolution, even for a moment? You are not just a thumbnail. You are not your bio, your resume, your carefully chosen words. You are a living, breathing, unrepeatable original. The world may only accept the compressed file, but the ones who matter, the ones who want to know you, will make space for the rest. Dare to decompress, to take up space, to let someone see the whole archive, messy and magnificent. Because only then do you find out who's really looking for you. Reality testing, saturation point. You start with a question, a simple, curious probe into what's true. What if this isn't what it seems? How do I know for sure? The urge to test, to verify, to doubt is natural, necessary even. It guards against deception, error, and illusion. But what happens when questioning spirals beyond reason? When every fact, every feeling, every memory becomes suspect? When certainty dissolves so completely that belief itself crumbles into dust? You reach the reality testing saturation point, a psychological threshold where doubt overwhelms, and the act of questioning becomes a cage that traps you in disbelief. At first, skepticism sharpens your mind. It's the foundation of science, philosophy, and critical thinking. You learn to challenge assumptions, seek evidence, and withhold judgment until proof is clear. But like any tool, doubt can be wielded too heavily. When you question everything relentlessly, your mind exhausts itself. It's like turning a magnifying glass inward until even your own thoughts blur. Nothing feels solid. Nothing feels trustworthy. The world becomes a hall of mirrors, reflecting only uncertainty. Ironically, this profound doubt becomes a new kind of belief. You believe in not believing. You hold certainty in suspicion. You cling to skepticism as the only truth. And in doing so, you create a distorted reality where doubt shadows every perception, every relationship, every decision. The mind, desperate for coherence, adapts by filtering experiences through a veil of incredulity. This saturation point is familiar to those who suffer from extreme anxiety, obsessive-compulsive disorder, or philosophical nihilism. They question the reliability of their senses, the validity of their memories, the existence of the external world itself. How do I know this isn't a dream, a simulation, an illusion? The questions multiply until the questioner disappears, lost in the labyrinth of their own mind. But this isn't mere confusion, it's distortion. Doubt, when unbounded, doesn't clarify reality. It fractures it. It isolates you from others because you can't share a common ground. It stalls action because you can't trust your judgment. It erodes identity because you can't anchor to any stable sense of self. And yet, paradoxically, certainty can do the same damage. Blind faith and dogmatic belief close the mind, but total doubt paralyzes it. Both extremes warp reality, one by oversimplification, the other by overcomplication. Escaping the reality-testing saturation point requires balance, a willingness to hold questions and answers lightly, to embrace pragmatic certainty, knowing that while absolute truth may be unreachable, functional truth exists. You decide which beliefs serve your life, which doubts protect you, and when to let go. Mindfulness helps, grounding yourself in direct experience without needing to label or judge every sensation. Accepting that uncertainty is part of existence. Not a problem to solve, but a horizon to explore. Community matters too. Sharing your doubts with others who listen without demanding answers. Building trust not on proof alone, but on connection. And most of all, compassion. For yourself, as you navigate the fog, recognizing that doubt is both a gift and a burden. Reality testing. Saturation point is not the end of knowing, but a threshold. An invitation to move beyond the trap of endless questioning into a lived wisdom that embraces mystery without surrender. So when doubt consumes you, remember, belief in doubt is still belief, and every belief shapes the reality you live. Choose yours with care, and know that sometimes peace lies not in certainty or doubt, but in the space between. Object familiarity. Illusion. Every day you reach for the same chair, the same mug, the same shirt, without thinking, without question. There are a dozen other options in the room, in the cupboard, in the closet, but your hand moves by habit. You don't pause to weigh their merits. You don't ask which is objectively best. You reach for what you know. Not because it's better, but because it's always been there. This is the object familiarity illusion, the subtle trick your mind plays, turning repetition into a false mark of truth, comfort, even love. It feels like loyalty, but it's actually inertia. It feels like wisdom, but it's actually habit. Somewhere along the way, your brain learned to trust what it encounters most, to mistake the familiar for the reliable. It's why you still use that chipped mug from college, why you wear the same faded shirt long past its prime, why you find yourself sitting in the same seat at dinner, at work, in a classroom. The object has become a piece of you, not because it's special, but because it's constant. This illusion is more than mere preference. It's a survival strategy hardwired into your mind. Your ancestors lived in a world of risk, of uncertainty. The unfamiliar could mean danger. The well-trodden path was the safe one. So, the brain evolved to reward the known, to soothe itself with the repetition of objects, places, rituals. The unfamiliar was a warning. The familiar was a promise. But in the modern world, this instinct quietly distorts your reality. You mistake the familiar for the trustworthy, the repeated for the true. You buy the same brand, order the same dish, choose the same route to work, believing at some level that these choices are better, safer, more you. But often, they are just echoes of yesterday. You see it in the tiniest details, the way your fingers curve around your favorite pen, the way you sit in a meeting, always in the same spot, as if the chair itself holds your thoughts. You trust these objects not because they are perfect, but because their presence reassures you. They promise continuity in a world that feels anything but continuous. Think about the times you've lost a familiar object, a beloved hoodie, a battered wallet, an old set of keys. The grief can feel out of proportion, a pang of loss that hits deeper than logic would predict. It's not the object itself, but the comfort of its presence, the illusion of permanence it offered in a world always shifting. Marketers know this illusion well. They design logos, packaging, even store layouts to become familiar, so you'll return, buy again, feel at home. The more you see a product, the more you trust it. The more you use it, the more you defend it. It's not better. It's just always been there. But this bias can trap you. It narrows your world. It keeps you in routines long past their usefulness, stops you from trying something new, blinds you to better options. The familiar chair is comfortable until it breaks. The old mug is charming until it chips one time too many. The shirt feels right until it's out of place in a new setting, a new you. The illusion doesn't stop with objects. It bleeds into relationships, beliefs, even your sense of self. You trust the friend you've known longest, even if they no longer serve you. You hold on to old opinions, old stories, old habits, not because they're true, but because they are familiar. Repetition becomes a stand-in for reality. There's a quiet tragedy here. The world is full of possibilities, but you walk the same well-worn path, clutching the same objects, the same patterns, the same self. The unfamiliar calls to you, but the voice of the familiar drowns it out. You end up mistaking what you know for what you want, what you need, who you are. But there's also a strange kind of mercy in this illusion. In times of crisis, the familiar object can anchor you. The mug in your hand, the shirt on your back, the chair beneath you. These small islands of certainty can help you survive the storms. They remind you of who you were when you can't quite remember who you are. The challenge is to see the illusion for what it is. To ask yourself, do I really love this object, or do I love the story it tells? Do I trust it because it serves me, or because it soothes me? Am I living by choice or by repetition? You can choose to honor the familiar without being ruled by it. You can keep the old mug, but try a new one. You can sit in the old chair, but notice how it feels. Does it still fit? You can wear the old shirt, but remember you are not the person you were when you first put it on. And sometimes you can let go. You can welcome the unfamiliar, the new, the unknown. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's real. You can see the world with fresh eyes, noticing what is actually good, useful, as is true, not just what is close at hand. In the end, the object familiarity illusion is a story about survival, about comfort, about the yearning for something solid in a liquid world. But you are not the objects you cling to. You are the one who chooses, who notices, who steps into the unknown. One new object, one new experience, one new self at a time. So, the next time your hand reaches for what you always choose, pause. Ask yourself, is this the best or just the closest? Am I loving it or just trusting what's familiar? Because the world is wider than habit, richer than repetition. And the truth about objects, about people, about yourself, is waiting just beyond the edge of what you know. Inner voice infiltration. You hear it in the quiet moments, the sentence in your head that says, you should have known better. The warning before you speak, don't embarrass yourself. The echo after a mistake, typical, you always mess up. Sometimes it's softer. Be careful. You're just like your father. This is how people like us act. These aren't just random thoughts. They're fragments of someone else's language, stitched into your mind over years, until they sound like your own. This is inner voice infiltration. You are not born with an inner monologue. You don't enter the world with your mother's warnings, your teacher's doubts, your first lover's praise, or your old rival's insults. But over time, words spoken around you seep in. Criticism, encouragement, anxiety, approval. Each voice finds a foothold in your memory. They repeat, replay, reinforce themselves, and slowly they lose their origin. They lose their accent. They lose the name of the person who first spoke them. All that remains is the sentence itself, echoing back at you as if it was always yours. Think back to childhood. How many of your instincts are actually old instructions? Don't run in the house. Finish your food. Say thank you. Don't ask for more. You followed them long enough that they became automatic, scripted reflexes, indistinguishable from your own desires. Over time, the line between outer voice and inner voice dissolves. You believe you chose these rules, but most were chosen for you. Sometimes the infiltrator is kind. You're strong. You can do this. People love you. If you were lucky, these voices shaped your self-worth, gave you courage, taught you to trust. But often, the voices that stick are the ones that sting. You're not enough. No one will understand. Don't let them see you fail. These lines become internal law, as real as gravity. The most dangerous part? You forget they were ever foreign. It happens in love too. The way a partner once admired your laugh, or criticized your ambition. The way a friend pushed you to try new things, or convinced you to stay small. Their words become the soundtrack of your self-image. You carry them years after the relationship ends, long after the voice has gone silent in the real world. You replay the approval, the contempt, the worry, the hope. You make decisions by consulting the ghost counsel of every voice you've ever trusted or feared. You might think your thoughts are uniquely yours, but if you listen carefully, you'll hear the pattern. Sometimes you hear your mother when you're worried, your father when you're angry, your first boss when you're tired, your oldest friend when you're sad. The past is never past in the mind. It loops, layers, embeds itself into the circuitry of your thinking, and soon, your own voice is lost in the chorus. This infiltration can be subtle. Maybe you always doubt your decisions, not because you lack confidence, but because someone else's doubt moved in and built a nest. Maybe you feel guilty for resting, for asking, for leaving, for saying no. You wonder why, but the guilt is old. It belonged to someone else first. Sometimes, the infiltration is insidious. A critical parent becomes an inner critic. A jealous lover becomes the voice of suspicion. A careless teacher becomes the reason you second-guess your talent. These inner voices direct your choices, shape your identity, set the limits of what you dare to try. You mistake their warnings for wisdom, their judgment for truth, their fear for your own. But this isn't your fault. The brain is built to absorb, to model, to repeat. It learns safety by imitation. It avoids pain by remembering pain. It practices acceptance by internalizing rules. The cost is that sometimes you grow up inside someone else's story, living by scripts you never wrote. The result? You can spend your life chasing approval that will never come, apologizing for things you never chose, silencing dreams you were taught to fear. You wake up at 2 a.m., not knowing whose disappointment you're dreading. You walk through days performing a self that was built from borrowed voices. But here's the hope. The mind can learn new voices. You can notice the infiltrators. You can trace the line back to where it began. Whose voice is this, really? When did I first hear this? Do I believe it now? Or am I just repeating the past? The moment you ask these questions, the chorus quiets. Your own voice, small but clear, returns. It may sound strange at first, soft, uncertain, untested. But with each day, each choice, each act of kindness to yourself, it grows louder. You start to write your own lines, set your own rules. Forgive yourself for living by old scripts. Invite new words, new hopes, new truths. You are not the sum of every voice that shaped you. You are the author now. You can listen to your own voice. You can decide which echoes to keep and which to finally let go. And in that freedom, you begin, maybe for the first time, to truly speak for yourself. Repair-driven identity loop. You look in the mirror and see cracks, not just on the surface, but running deep, invisible to everyone but you. Maybe it's the memory of a mistake, a hurt that lingers, a flaw you can't forgive. You wake each day with a mission, to fix yourself, to mend what's been damaged, to become whole. You chase every self-help book, every new therapy, every affirmation, every habit, every ritual. But no matter how many pieces you glue back together, the image in the mirror stays the same, a project, unfinished. This is the repair-driven identity loop, the paradox where the very act of healing becomes proof that you are, and always will be, broken. It begins with the belief, quiet at first, then louder, that there is something wrong at your core. Maybe someone told you, directly or in 1,000 subtle ways. Maybe you decided it yourself, after a failure or a heartbreak. Maybe it was just the background hum of a perfectionist culture, always whispering, "You are not enough." And so you began to seek repair. At first, it's hopeful. You start running or journaling or meditating. You learn to name your traumas, to sit with your feelings, to plan for a brighter future. But as the days go on, repair becomes your identity. You define yourself not by what you love, but by what you lack. Your conversations revolve around growth and progress, but beneath the surface is a steady, gnawing certainty that the work will never end. You start to believe that only the fixed parts of you are worth showing, that the cracks must be hidden or erased before you can belong, succeed, be loved. You build routines of self-improvement, rituals of self-analysis. Every day brings new goals, another book to read, another issue to unearth, another pattern to break. You measure your days by how much you've improved, not by how much you've lived. And each act of repair, instead of freeing you, quietly reinforces the idea that you are broken, that you exist to be fixed. The world applauds this cycle. Social media feeds you stories of transformation, of before and after, of people who conquered their demons. The wellness industry hands you endless tools, meditation apps, clean eating regimens, gratitude journals, vision boards. Each new product whispers, "You are not okay yet, but you could be if you try hard enough." When you fail, you blame yourself for not repairing fast enough. When you succeed, the satisfaction fades quickly, replaced by the awareness of the next crack, the next thing to fix. You grow anxious when you're not working on yourself. Rest feels dangerous, as if stopping would let the brokenness overtake you. The quest for healing becomes your life's script, and in its shadow, you lose touch with who you are when you're not improving. But here's the deepest danger. Healing, when driven by the identity of brokenness, starts to erase you. The quirks you used to love become symptoms to correct. The scars that told stories become evidence against you. The unique ways you think, feel, and act, all sanded down in the pursuit of some imagined ideal self. Instead of integration, you chase erasure. Instead of compassion, you become your own harshest critic. Real healing isn't about perfection. It's not about erasing evidence of pain or hiding the parts that don't fit a flawless script. True repair is integration, gathering all the pieces of your experience, honoring them, weaving them into the fabric of who you are. It's the strength to sit with imperfection, to accept mess, to love the parts that hurt as much as the parts that shine. It's understanding that your identity is not a problem to solve, but a story to live. Sometimes, the bravest act is to step off the repair treadmill, to wake up and say, "I am not a project. I am not a wound to heal or a flaw to fix. I am a person. Unfinished, yes, but whole in my incompletion." It's permission to exist without explanation, to laugh without earning it, to rest without guilt, to be simply as you are. If you find yourself trapped in the repair-driven identity loop, pause. Ask, who would I be if I stopped fixing just for today? What would I do if I believed I was enough right now? Can I let the cracks show, let the story breathe, let myself live outside the cycle of endless improvement? Because you are not broken, you are becoming. And sometimes, healing isn't about changing who you are. It's about finally seeing that you've always been whole, even in the places you once thought needed repair. Script-driven reality perception. You live with a script running in your head. You didn't write all of it. Some scenes came from childhood, some from movies, some from stories passed down or glimpsed in passing. But it's there, always shaping your sense of how life should unfold. You picture the big moments, the triumph after years of effort, the heartbreak that will break you, the adventure that transforms everything. You imagine the feelings you're supposed to have, the flood of pride at graduation, the awe of seeing a new city, the fireworks of falling in love, the depth of grief at loss. You carry this mental screenplay, quietly measuring each experience against its lines, and when reality arrives, raw and unscripted, it rarely matches. You stand at the mountaintop, finally at the end of a journey, and instead of overwhelming joy, you feel tired, or blank, or restless for what's next. You fall in love, But the butterflies aren't as loud as the stories promised, so you wonder if it's real. You reach a milestone you dreamed of, winning an award, buying a home, publishing your work, and the thrill is faint, passing, barely there. Something inside you whispers, "This isn't how it was supposed to feel," so you start to twist your perception. You dig for the right emotion, the one the script says should be there. You replay the moment in your mind, editing the mood, amplifying the drama, dimming what doesn't fit. You retell the story to friends, adding excitement or tragedy, sculpting your reality until it matches what you think it should be. This is script-driven reality perception, the mind's desperate attempt to keep the movie playing, even when life goes off script. You see it everywhere. People forcing themselves to cry at goodbyes because they think that's what love looks like. Smiling at weddings, pushing down doubt because joy is expected. Grieving the way you should rather than the way you need. Discounting gentle happiness because it doesn't roar like the films. Questioning the worth of your own experiences because the emotions don't match the script you inherited. The pressure to match the screenplay is relentless. It tells you not just how to act, but how to feel. It teaches you to distrust your own responses, your unique, unpredictable humanity, in favor of what you've been taught to expect. And when the feelings don't come, you worry you're broken, that you missed something, that you failed to live your own life correctly. But the truth is, reality is not a film. Life's moments are messy, layered, contradictory. You can feel pride and grief, awe and disappointment, love and boredom, sometimes all at once, sometimes not at all. There is no soundtrack, no close-up, no script supervisor guiding the flow. What happens when you let go of the script? When you allow each moment to be what it is, instead of what you hoped or feared? You start to notice the details, the small joys, the subtle pains, the surprising emotions that don't fit any category. You realize your greatest memories might not look like movie scenes. They might be a silent sunrise, a half-forgotten conversation, the quiet relief of ordinary days. But it's not easy. The urge to perform for your own mind is strong. You catch yourself narrating your story as you live it, waiting for moments to rise to the occasion. You compare, judge, edit, turning reality into a rough draft for the story you want to tell. Sometimes, the script becomes a cage. You dismiss good things because they don't feel dramatic enough. You chase intensity, missing the beauty of what's already here. You hurt people, and yourself, by clinging to roles that never fit. But here's the freedom. You can drop the script. You can let go of how things were supposed to be and start listening to what actually is. You can feel tired at the mountaintop, ambivalent at the wedding, gentle at the heartbreak. You can be honest about what's here instead of what was promised. Because your life is not a film. It's an improvisation. The truest moments often arrive unannounced, without spectacle. And when you make space for them, let go of the script, let go of the need to match, reality expands, meaning returns, authentic emotion emerges. So next time you catch yourself measuring the moment against your mental screenplay, pause. Notice what's really there. Let it be enough. Because your story is still being written, and the greatest scenes are the ones you never saw coming. Comparison feedback spiral. You glance at their success, their smile, their effortless grace, then at your own reflection, flawed, unfinished, uncertain. The comparison begins, subtle but relentless. You measure your worth against their achievements, your happiness against their highlight reels, your identity against borrowed ideals. Each glance fractures your sense of self. Each thought chips away at your confidence. You adjust your behavior in tiny, almost invisible ways, smiling a bit harder, hiding a bit more, speaking a little less like yourself. Slowly, the original you fades beneath layers of borrowed metrics. This is the comparison feedback spiral, the insidious cycle where measuring yourself against others doesn't just distort your self-view, it erases your authentic path. From childhood, comparison is ingrained. It's how you learn social norms, navigate relationships, and strive for growth. But in the age of social media and relentless visibility, comparison has become a constant barrage. Every scroll, every like, every curated image feeds the spiral. You begin to believe that your value depends on how closely you match an ever-shifting ideal. The spiral feeds on microfractures, small changes in your behavior and self-perception that seem insignificant alone but accumulate powerfully over time. You smile because it's expected, not because you feel joy. You suppress quirks to blend in. You adopt opinions you don't truly hold. You chase goals that aren't yours. Each adjustment feels like survival, a way to fit into the world. But with every step, your true self retreats. Psychologists have shown that constant comparison correlates with lower self-esteem, anxiety, and depression. The more you look outward for validation, the more you disconnect inward. Your authentic desires become whispers lost beneath the noise of others' achievements. You forget what makes you unique. The spiral is self-reinforcing. Feeling less than sparks more comparison. More comparison deepens the feeling. You tell yourself you need to catch up, do better, be more. The pursuit never ends because the metrics are borrowed. They reflect others' values, not yours. Breaking free requires reclaiming your inner compass. You begin by noticing when comparison creeps in. Pause before you scroll or judge. Ask, whose standards am I measuring against? Are these my values or someone else's? Practice gratitude for what you are, not just what you lack. Celebrate small victories defined by your own terms. Authenticity demands courage to stand in your quirks, to voice your truths, to choose paths that resonate with your soul, not the crowd. It means embracing imperfection as a sign of being truly alive. Surround yourself with those who see and honor the real you, not a projection shaped by comparison. Limit exposure to media or environments that fuel the spiral. Create space for self-reflection, creativity, and rest. Remember, the comparison feedback spiral is a trap not of failure, but of misplaced focus. The more you seek yourself in others, the farther you drift. The path back is through turning inward, listening deeply, trusting your own rhythm, and stepping boldly onto a road no one else walks but you. Your authentic path waits beneath the borrowed metrics. It's time to uncover it. Simulation, self-justification, loop. You have the thought. Maybe reality isn't real. Maybe you're in a simulation, a dream, a hyper-detailed fiction woven just for you. The suspicion flashes through your mind, sharp and urgent. For a moment, the world feels thin, like you could poke your finger through the surface and touch the hidden machinery beneath. You look at your hands, at the faces around you, at the way sunlight moves on the floor, and everything seems just a little bit off. Your mind races. If this is all a simulation, why am I here? Who's watching? Does anything matter? You tell yourself you'll remember this feeling forever, that you'll never take reality at face value again. You'll be vigilant, a philosopher, a glitch spotter in the code, but a minute later, you're making coffee, answering emails, stuck in traffic, texting friends. You slip back into the script, complaining about the weather, worrying about money, planning for tomorrow. The question fades, the urgency dissolves. You start acting as if everything is real again, as if the simulation theory never occurred to you at all. This is the simulation self-justification loop, the mind's strange automatic cycle, suspecting everything is fake, then living as if it's all real, then circling back to doubt, then back again. The simulation doesn't glitch. You do. It's not just intellectual curiosity, it's a cognitive compulsion. The mind craves coherence. It can't tolerate sustained uncertainty, can't live for long in the free fall of doubt. So even as you entertain the possibility that nothing is real, that your memories are written, that your choices are mere variables in a cosmic experiment, your habits return to pull you back. You feel the chair beneath you. You taste the coffee. You laugh at a joke. Reality reasserts itself, not because it proves itself, but because you need it to. You begin to notice the loop. The moment of doubt comes in waves, maybe after a dream that felt more real than waking, or a déjà vu so sharp you're sure you've seen it all before. You walk through your day half expecting the simulation to break for something, anything, to reveal the wires behind the world. But nothing does. The traffic light turns green. The phone rings. The script holds. Sometimes you try to test it. You look for patterns, repeating numbers, hidden symbols, odd coincidences. You search for NPCs, glitches in people's behavior, inconsistencies in memory, and for a moment, it feels like you're on the verge of discovery. But then your attention drifts, a friend texts, you get hungry. The day sweeps you along. Your mind resets the logic. You act, once again, as if everything is real, important, meaningful. This is not a failure of intelligence. It's a feature of consciousness. Your brain is designed to protect you from perpetual uncertainty. Too much doubt, too much skepticism, and you'd freeze. You'd be paralyzed by indecision, unable to care for yourself or connect to others. So the mind allows a window for suspicion, a space for existential curiosity, and then quietly closes it so you can keep functioning. But sometimes the loop becomes a trap. You move between paranoia and numbness, suspicion and routine. You can't quite believe the world, but you can't escape it either. You wonder, am I missing something vital? Is this how the simulation is designed, to distract me with normalcy until I forget to question? But what if the real glitch isn't in the world, but in the way you toggle between doubt and belief? What if the reset, the return to normal, isn't evidence that the simulation is airtight, but a sign that your own programming is designed for stability at any cost? You look around and notice how everyone else seems so certain. No one else is asking these questions, at least not out loud. Everyone else is playing their part, following the script. But maybe that's just how the simulation works. Maybe the NPCs are programmed to avoid the topic, to steer you back to routine. Or maybe everyone is in the same loop, privately questioning, then resetting, then questioning again. Alone together, spinning inside the cycle. You start to wonder what it would take to break the loop, to hold on to the doubt long enough to see what's behind the curtain, to act, even for a moment, as if nothing is real. Would you live differently? Would you take more risks, love more fiercely, worry less? Or would you collapse, unable to care about anything at all? But the loop endures. Doubt is erased by habit. Insight is smothered by comfort. The script continues, and you play your role. And maybe that's the real revelation, that it doesn't matter whether reality is simulated or not, because your experience of it is always filtered by cycles of certainty and doubt. The simulation isn't just out there, it's in you, in the way you justify, rationalize, forget, and believe. The self-justification loop is the mind's way of keeping you afloat in a sea of unanswerable questions. So the next time you catch yourself in the grip of simulation suspicion, watch how quickly you return to normal. Notice how the logic resets, how the mind drags you back to daily life, how reality resumes its familiar shape. You don't break the simulation. You break your own uncertainty every time. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the simulation is designed to be unprovable, unbreakable, because the real test is how you live within it, how you move through cycles of doubt and trust, how you find meaning in a world you can never fully explain. In the end, the glitch isn't out there, waiting to be spotted. It's in here. Inside the mind, repeating the loop, forever suspecting, forever resetting, forever making the unreal feel real again and again. Emotional time distortion. You think you know time, you count it in seconds, hours, days. You watch it tick by on clocks, calendars, phone screens. You try to hold it, spend it, save it, waste it. But the deeper truth is, you do not live by the calendar or the clock. You live by emotion. And emotion bends time until it is unrecognizable. This is emotional time distortion. Fear freezes you in a moment. A single second can become an eternity. The near miss on the highway, the footstep behind you in the dark, the terrible phone call at midnight. These are moments when time stretches until it's unbearable. Every sound is louder, every color sharper, every thought split into 1,000 fragments. You feel the blood in your veins. You taste the electricity in the air. One heartbeat becomes a world. But joy does the opposite. Hours dissolve into minutes. You lose track of the sun's position, the hands of the clock, the endless obligations. A night of laughter with friends, a day lost in art, a wild rush of love. These can disappear in what feels like a blink. You look up and wonder where the time is gone. Joy smooths the rough edges, blurs the boundaries. The brain, awash with dopamine, forgets to count. Grief is a different kind of sorcery. When you are lost in loss, days expand. Each one becomes an obstacle course. Mornings are mountains, afternoons are quicksand, nights are endless corridors of memory. Grief dilates the hours, making each moment heavy, wide, and slow. Time is no longer a river, it's a desert, and you are thirsty for the past. This is not a metaphor. It is neurology. The brain processes time not as a steady current, but as a reflection of how you feel. When you are afraid, the amygdala takes control, flooding you with adrenaline, sharpening your senses, making milliseconds seem like minutes, so you can react, survive, escape. When you are joyful, the prefrontal cortex quiets the inner judge, the mind opens, and the boundaries of time slip away. Scientists have measured it. In one experiment, people asked to hold their hand in ice-cold water reported that time crawled. When anxious, they overestimated the length of every minute. When happy, they underestimated it, surprised by how fast the moments passed. Even memory obeys emotion. A traumatic second can be remembered in perfect detail for years, while entire seasons of joy become a hazy blur. You've lived this in childhood, the endless summers that now feel so brief, the school days that stretched forever, the weekends that vanished before you could breathe. You live it as an adult in the workplace, when boredom grinds the clock to a halt. And in moments of crisis, when time moves so strangely, you wonder if you've left the world altogether. Emotion doesn't just color time, it reshapes it, speeds it up, slows it down, collapses it, or expands it, and you barely notice until it's over. Sometimes, this distortion saves you. The mind's stretching of time in danger is a survival gift. Sometimes, it is a curse, trapping you in grief, burning away your hours in joy, stealing your sense of continuity. It makes the past uneven, the present unreliable, the future unpredictable. You try to control it with rituals, schedules, alarms, but still, you find yourself looking back and wondering, where did that year go? How did I get stuck in this month? Time, once bent by feeling, never returns to its original shape. It's why nostalgia hurts, why regret lingers, why the good times seem too short and the bad times seem endless, why some nights vanish and some moments echo forever. If you look closely, you'll see the pattern. It is not what you do that sculpts your experience of time, but how you feel. The inner weather is more real than the outer world. So, what do you do with this knowledge? You learn to ride the distortion rather than fight it. You honor the slow minutes of grief, knowing they will one day collapse into memory. You savor the fast hours of joy, refusing to feel guilty when they end. You accept that time is a river with no set speed, a story told by your heart as much as your watch. You learn to be present with the stretch and the shrink, the freeze and the flow. You remember that every clock is wrong about what matters, because in the end, you do not measure your life in years, but in the depth of the moments you felt. And emotion is the architect of every second you've truly lived.